Chapter 457. Suppressing the pleasant surprise in his heart, Gray put away all the blood and magic potions. Withstanding the pressure, he arrived at the inner side of the room, where there were 5 purple wooden chests. Opening the first chest, a sea of red entered his eyes. It was a chest full of red gems. They were top-grade rune materials, blood gems. This was a rune material that was far more precious than purple gold stones. Opening the second chest, a frost-like color entered his eyes. These were frost gems, a top-grade rune material that was no less precious than blood gems. The third chest, the fourth chest, the fifth chest. In the end, all 5 chests were opened by Gray. They were all precious rune materials. All of them are precious rune materials. Could the owner of this secret room be a rune master? Although he didn't get any gold coins or magic coins, Gray didn't feel that it was a pity. These were all extremely precious top-grade rune materials. If he sold them, 20 to 30 million gold coins wouldn't be a problem. One could imagine how high their value was. However, he was a little puzzled. Why did the owner of this secret room collect so many rune materials? Could it be that the owner of this secret room was a rune master? Was the rune mechanism outside also arranged by the owner? With such doubts in mind, Gray put the 5 chests into his purple ring and walked towards the bookshelf on the left. The books that were placed in the depths of the secret room were definitely not something that the books in the library outside could compare to. He was a little curious as to what kind of books were on these shelves. Would there be extremely precious blood spell books or blood skills? Arriving next to the bookshelf, Lin Yun casually took out a book. The cover of the book was leather, and the pages were also leather. Even after 1,000 years, the pages were still undamaged, and the words on the book were still clearly visible. Sharp Wind Rune. Seeing the words on the book, Gray had already expected the contents of the book. Sure enough, after opening it, his guess was confirmed. The book was full of large sections of cryptic text records, as well as pages of extremely complicated runic arrays. This was a high-grade wind rune book. It was extremely precious. If a rune master saw it, he would definitely be wild with joy and be willing to exchange his wealth for it. However, it wasn't very useful to Gray. Without any foundation in runes, he couldn't understand this book at all. It was like a primary school student reading a university function textbook. It was too difficult to understand. Gray took out another book to read. Frost Rune, an ice attribute rune book. It was also an extremely high-grade rune book that Gray couldn't understand. Putting it away, Lin Yun picked up another book to read. It was also a rune book. After looking through several books in succession, he found that they were all books of this type. Their value was indeed extremely high, but to Gray they were not very practical. He could tell that these books were all rune books. Now, he could basically confirm that the owner of this secret room was a rune grandmaster. Otherwise, it would be impossible to collect so many rune materials and rune books. Gray checked the 20 or so books one by one and found that all of them were related to runes. They were all extremely valuable and highly specialized books that weren't very useful to Gray. Gray looked past the bookshelf and looked at the weapon rack. There were a dozen or so magic weapons on the rack. There were sword-type magic weapons, saber-type magic weapons, axe-type magic weapons, and spear-type magic weapons. They were emitting colorful halos. Just from their appearance, Lin Yun could tell that these magic weapons weren't simple. I wonder if there are any silver-grade magic weapons here? Looking at the dozen or so magic weapons, Gray's heart was filled with excitement. Shifeng pulled out a sword-shaped mana weapon and infused it with blood power. Suddenly, a cyan light attached itself to the weapon, causing it to grow to 3 meters long. At the same time, an ear-piercing buzzing sound came from the weapon. Coming to the outside passage, Gray slashed the purple-gold stone wall with his sword. Boom! The purple-gold stone wall was intact. Although the runic circle had been destroyed, the reinforced lines were not damaged and were still working. Its power is about the first level of the desolate grade. This is a pinnacle bronze magic weapon, Gray judged after feeling the power of the attack. He was now at the second level of the barbarian grade. Infusing it with blood energy, it could exert the destructive power of the first level of the desolate grade. This meant that it was a pinnacle bronze magic weapon. After testing the dozen or so magic weapons, even the non-sword type ones, Gray found that these magic weapons were all pinnacle bronze magic weapons. Pinnacle bronze magic weapons were only inferior to silver-grade magic weapons in terms of quality. Generally speaking, only a few count families, the Marquis family and the Duke family owned them, and they were extremely rare. There were more than a dozen pinnacle bronze magic weapons here, and their value was definitely very high. He had never bought them before, so he didn't have an accurate understanding of the specific price. However, Gray estimated that if these dozen or so pinnacle bronze magic weapons were to be sold, they should be worth at least 40 to 50 million gold coins. Moreover, these things were extremely rare. They were basically priceless, so he didn't have to worry about not being able to sell them. It's a pity that there are no silver-grade magic weapons. The only thing that Gray regretted was that there weren't any silver-grade magic weapons among these weapons. I'm greedy, Gray smiled. His harvest today was already big enough. If all these things were to be converted into gold coins, they would be worth hundreds of millions of gold coins. His harvest was extremely huge. As for the silver-grade magic weapons, these things were extremely rare even during the era of the Empire. It was normal that he didn't get it. After putting away the dozen or so weapons, Gray looked at the skeleton of a magic light powerhouse leaning against the innermost wall. If there was the most precious thing in this room, it would definitely be on this magic light powerhouse. Withstanding the pressure, Gray walked step by step towards the skeleton of the magic light powerhouse. As he got closer, the pressure from the skeleton of the magic light powerhouse became stronger and stronger. Fortunately, his current physical strength was extremely strong, and he successfully withstood it. He came to the side of the skeleton and sized it up. As a top-notch powerhouse, the clothes on the skeleton were naturally not simple. Although it looked like a casual aristocratic attire, the material was extremely unusual. Even after 1,000 years, it still wasn't completely damaged. He once suffered a very serious injury when he was alive. Gray looked at the skeleton's chest. There, the aristocratic attire was cut open, and he could see the jade-like ribs inside. And these ribs, without exception, were all broken in two at the chest. The skeleton's chest was almost cut in half. If Gray's guess was correct, this should be the skeleton's fatal wound. Gray thought of the ruins of the Empire that he, Sophia, and Teresa had explored. They had encountered the skeleton of a powerhouse suspected to be of the magic light rank. The other party should have died from a punch to the heart. And now, this powerhouse suspected to be of the magic light rank was almost cut in half. What exactly happened 1,000 years ago? Why did two powerhouses suspected to be of the magic light rank die so miserably? Gray held his chin with one hand, his heart full of doubts. 1,000 years ago, the Empire suddenly disappeared in an extremely short period of time. Some guessed that it was destroyed by the four great kingdoms and replaced it. Some guessed that it was destroyed by the mysterious ghost merchants, and some guessed that it was met with a powerful external force. Now, it seemed that the possibility of it being destroyed by the four great kingdoms could almost be eliminated. The strength of the four great kingdoms was simply not enough to destroy the Empire. And the possibility of it being destroyed by the ghost merchants could not be eliminated. After all, Gray had seen the power of the ghost merchants. They could create an illusory space that filled an entire city. Such a method was simply unimaginable and indescribably powerful. However, in his heart, Gray felt that the Empire was not destroyed by the ghost merchants. There was no basis for this, and it could only be said to be a kind of intuition. From the rules of the ghost merchant's barter, it could be seen that the ghost merchant was a very principled person. Would such a principled person do something to destroy an empire? In Gray's view, it was not very likely. Even if they really had a grudge with the Empire, they should have killed the first and not implicated the entire Empire. Therefore, in Gray's view, it was more likely that it was the work of a powerful external force. This force came to this continent to do something or to search for something. Because of this matter, they had a conflict with the Empire, which ultimately led to the destruction of the Empire. And this force left this continent after the Empire was destroyed, which led to the rise of the four great kingdoms. If this force was still around, the four great kingdoms would not have had the chance to rise. Gray's gaze searched the skeleton and the surroundings, wanting to find something valuable. A saber. Soon, he found an outline on the ground. Judging from the shape of the outline, it should be a saber. After 1,000 years, a lot of dust had accumulated in the secret room, causing a lot of dust to stick to the surface of this saber. He happily brushed away the dust and grabbed the saber in his hand. If the weapon used by a powerhouse suspected to be at the magic light rank was below the silver rank, Gray would not believe it. It was even possible that it was at the gold rank. After all, the other party was a powerhouse suspected to be at the magic light rank. But soon, the expression on his face turned into deep regret. It's actually broken. This was a silver-white battle saber with a bronze hilt. The hilt was carved with a giant beast that Gray did not recognize. The hilt was the upper and lower mouth of the giant beast, and the blade seemed to be spat out from the mouth of the giant beast. However, the silver-white blade was only 1 meter long. At the tip, Gray estimated that about 1/3 of the area had completely disappeared. This was a broken saber. Chapter 458. Heartache, extreme heartache. Looking at the broken part of the blade, Gray felt extreme heartache. He had never felt such heartache before. A magical weapon that was suspected to be a silver grade, or even a gold grade, had been destroyed just like that. Not to mention Gray, even a king-level expert would feel the same heartache. Maybe there's still some of its power left? With anticipation in his heart, Gray poured the power of blood into the blade. However, after a long time, there was still no change to the blade. It was like a bucket that had its bottom cut open. No matter how much water was poured into it, it did not feel full. After pouring more than half of the power of blood into it, there was still no change. Gray stopped. Even if it was a silver-grade magical weapon, it would not have no reaction after he poured so much power of blood into it. This blade had been completely destroyed. There was no doubt about it. As this blade had once been at least a silver-grade weapon, it should be quite sturdy. However, that was all it had. It could not exert any of its power. In his hands, it was even less useful than an ordinary bronze-grade magical weapon. It's a good match for Stanley Grinton. Gray helplessly realized that the only use of this blade was for Stanley Grinton. One had no power of blood, leaving only a strong physical body. The other had lost all ability, leaving only sturdiness. To a certain extent, the corpse and the blade were a good match. He passed the broken blade to Stanley Grinton and let him try to swing it. Poof! The destructive power of the third level of the desolation grade brought about a strong gust of wind. It tore the clothes on the suspected king-level expert into pieces, revealing the skeleton wrapped in the tattered clothes. It was so clean that there was nothing on it. Logically speaking, the other party should have a spatial item, but judging from the way the other party died, Gray suspected that the spatial item on the other party's body should have fallen into the hands of the person who killed him. A map. Pieces of torn clothes floated in the secret room. Gray suddenly realized that there was a rather large map in the middle of these pieces of cloth. The material used to make the map seemed to be some kind of silk. It was so soft that it floated along with the rags. Gray stretched out his hand and carefully caught the map, afraid that it would tear apart like a piece of cloth. However, to Gray's surprise, the silk used to make the map was quite tough. Even after 1,000 years, it did not decay. On the map, there was a huge dark red pattern written in fresh blood. It was most likely drawn by this magic light powerhouse before his death. It was written in blood and right before death. Obviously, this should be a very important message. Gray looked at it carefully, but he couldn't figure out what it was. He looked at the map as a whole, trying to figure out where it was. This should be the map of this continent. 1,000 years had passed, and many things had changed. Many landforms had changed. After some time, Gray confirmed that this was a complete map of the continent. Gray took out the map of the Purple Moon Kingdom from the purple ring and compared it with the map of the continent. Suddenly, Gray's pupils shrank. This place. On the map of the continent there was a circle written in fresh blood. Within the circle there was a triangle, and in the middle of the triangle there was a circular symbol. Comparing it to the map of the Purple Moon Kingdom, Gray suddenly realized that one of the points where the circle and triangle intersected was a place he had been to before. It was in the Scarlet Leaf Forest, a place where Gray had encountered 100,000 ghosts. To be precise, it was at the place where the Palace of Unknown Style was. Is it a coincidence, or is it related? Gray was bewildered, thinking of the mystery of the palace. To be able to attract hundreds of thousands of ghosts, the architectural style did not belong to the era of the Empire, nor did it belong to the era of the kingdom. There was also a broken sword that was suspected to be a weapon of the gods. All these signs pointed to the extraordinary palace, and it contained a shocking secret. And now, this palace seemed to be related to the mark left behind by a magic light-class powerhouse during the Empire's era. This made him feel bewildered. He didn't know if there was a connection between the two, and if there was, what was the connection? He took out the maps of the Scarlet Kingdom, the Jewel Kingdom, and the Flame Kingdom, wanting to find the other 2 points, as well as the specific location of the circle in the middle. This point should be in the Scarlet Kingdom's Black Fog Swamp. This point should be in the Jewel Kingdom's Sapphire Mountain. This circle should be in the Red Desert of the Flame Kingdom. He discovered that the diagram drawn by this magic light-rank powerhouse before his death had the 4 most iconic locations. They were located in the regions of the 4 great kingdoms. It could be said that it spanned an extremely large area, almost encompassing the entire continent. Assuming that the relic is related to this point, the point in the Purple Moon Kingdom has a mysterious relic with a broken sword in it. Then, what are the other 3 locations? Gray narrowed his eyes. The point in the Purple Moon Kingdom was using some mysterious method to repair a sword that was suspected to have been used by the god. Then, would the other 3 locations also have a weapon that was suspected to have been used by the gods, just like the broken sword? What was the purpose of using triangles and circles to connect the 4 locations? Gray looked at the map drawn with blood. Suddenly, the more he looked, the more shocked he became. Why does this look like a simplified version of the runic matrix? This can't be a runic matrix that covers the entire continent, right? Gray was shocked by his own conclusion. A huge runic matrix that covered the entire continent. How huge was this runic matrix? How huge was this amount of work? If it was really a runic matrix, then what kind of force set up this runic matrix? The Empire? Unlikely. Judging from the architectural style, it was not the style of the Empire. Some force that existed before the Empire? This was possible. Until now, the history that he knew was only the Empire from 1,000 years ago. As for what kind of force existed before the Empire, he did not know. Perhaps there was another force that existed before the Empire, and it was a force that was even more powerful than the Empire. After all, from the murals in the palace, he could vaguely judge the strength of this force. A force that destroyed the Empire? This was also possible. The force that destroyed the Empire must have come with a purpose. From the map drawn by the Magic Light Level Fighter, the force that destroyed the Empire must be related to this huge runic matrix. Perhaps they were looking for this huge runic matrix, or perhaps this huge runic matrix was set up by them. Gray's mind was in a mess. He felt that this thing was probably not something that he could come into contact with at the moment, but he was tempted to find out more. He wanted to go to the other 3 important locations of this runic matrix to explore and see what was in these 3 locations. According to his guess, the other 3 locations were likely to have broken weapons that were suspected to have been used by the god. This huge runic matrix should be a huge repair runic matrix. To set up such a huge runic matrix on a continent, this made Gray extremely shocked. Speaking of which, the sword-shaped weapon that was suspected to have been used by the gods in the Red Leaf Forest seems to be about to be repaired. Suddenly, Gray sucked in a breath of cold air. A trace of horror arose in his heart. Did the force that set up this runic matrix still exist? According to his guess, this force was likely to exist. To be able to set up such a huge runic matrix, it must be an extremely powerful force. It might even be more powerful than the Empire from 1,000 years ago. It would be very difficult to destroy such a large force. What really made Gray feel shocked was that this huge runic matrix seemed to be repairing the weapon that was suspected to have been used by the god. It seemed to be about to be repaired. It could be imagined that after the weapon was repaired, this force would inevitably descend on this continent. This was a force that was powerful enough to surpass the Empire. The arrival of such a powerful force would inevitably have a strong impact on the original forces on this continent. If things went wrong, the original forces might be destroyed. The most terrifying possibility was that the force that set up such a huge runic matrix and the force that destroyed the Empire belonged to different forces. If that was the case, it would not be a force that surpassed the Empire that descended, but 2 forces that surpassed the Empire. It was very likely that this continent would become a battlefield and a terrifying conflict would break out. At that time, it would be a disaster for the forces on this continent. After checking the secret room and finding that there were no hidden compartments, Gray hurriedly left the secret room. The thoughts that were triggered in this secret room made him feel suffocated. After staying in Half Moon Castle for a day, Gray set off for Shamrock Chamber of Commerce's headquarters. He had already checked the secret room. It was time to deal with Shamrock Chamber of Commerce's troubles. Because there were no teleportation coordinates set in nearby places, he could only hurry to Shamrock Chamber of Commerce. A few days later, he entered a huge city with millions of people and saw a huge building. This was an extremely huge building. It was built with white stone and had a total of 3 floors. There were many complicated patterns carved on it. From afar, it looked like a piece of art that was meticulously carved out of white jade. In front of the building, there was a huge white stone plaza. There were many high-end carriages parked in the plaza. At the entrance of the building, there were men and women dressed in luxurious clothes going in and out. They all had the temperament of a person of high status. It was obvious that their identities were not simple. This was the headquarters of Shamrock Chamber of Commerce that directly belonged to the Nahum family. Chapter 459. How impressive! Gray walked down from a rental carriage and looked at the headquarters of the Chamber of Commerce in front of him. The corners of his mouth revealed a trace of a sneer. As the Chamber of Commerce directly under the Nahum family of the 3rd Duke, Shamrock Chamber of Commerce was naturally very large in scale. It had branches in many cities of the Purple Moon Kingdom. It could be said that the branches were spread throughout the Purple Moon Kingdom. They were involved in a wide range of businesses, such as medicinal herbs, leather, tea leaves, jewelry, and so on. Every year, they brought millions of gold to the Nahum family. The Fergus family was in the medicinal herbs business. When they were working with the Sidney family, the Fergus family had already tried to grow medicinal herbs in their territory. After so many years, especially after the Fergus family became a count, the scale of their medicinal herbs business had multiplied several times, becoming the biggest source of income for the Fergus family. After the Sidney family met with disaster, there was no way to cooperate with them. The Fergus family began to look for business partners to export their medicinal herbs. After a lot of effort, they established a stable relationship with a few business partners. However, under the coercion and enticement of the Clover Merchant Guild, these business partners suddenly changed their minds and cancelled their cooperation with the Fergus family, causing the Fergus family's medicinal herbs to be seriously unsaleable. Some of the dried and easily preserved herbs were still fine, but some of the freshly picked herbs suffered heavy losses due to the unsaleability. They were losing money almost every day. With Gray's current wealth, this amount of money was nothing in his eyes. Even if the Fergus family did not have any source of income in the future, he could still guarantee that the Fergus family would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of their lives. However, it was one thing to not care about it, and another to be maliciously suppressed and humiliated. Nobles cared a lot about their reputation. Sometimes, a small compromise could be resolved peacefully, but in the end it would develop into an intense conflict. The reason for this was not because the heads of these noble families were simple-minded, but because it concerned the family's image to the outside world. A bad situation could put the family in a disadvantageous position. When a family showed weakness to the outside world, many families would not mind stepping on them. It was human nature to bully the weak and fear the strong. However, when a clan displayed their strength in every aspect, the other clans would hesitate. Was it worth it to step on them and cause both sides to suffer? The Fergus family was now facing such a situation. If they didn't respond to the Nahum family's suppression, they would likely be suppressed even more severely by the Nahum family. Of course, Gray wouldn't act recklessly because of this. The reason he dared to attack Shamrock Merchant Guild was because he no longer feared the Nahum family behind Shamrock Merchant Guild. Since he was already fearless, why should he endure? Sister, Shamrock Merchant Guild's asking price is too high. If we buy herbs at this price, we will lose at least 20% of our profits this year. In front of him, a young woman and a young man walked out of the Shamrock Chamber of Commerce and passed by Gray. The young man complained while the young woman frowned. The young woman's name was Leander. She was beautiful and had the temperament of a businesswoman. The young man's name was Quentin Leander. His face was slightly immature and he should be less than 20 years old. The two of them came from the Leander family, a merchant family. This was a pure merchant family. They operated a chamber of commerce called Dawn Chamber of Commerce. The main business of this chamber of commerce was to refine herbs into finished products and sell them to the outside world. The original herb supplier had already gone bankrupt under the suppression of Shamrock Merchant Guild. They had no choice but to cooperate with Shamrock Merchant Guild. However, they didn't expect Shamrock Merchant Guild's asking price to be several times higher than the previous supplier. If they followed Shamrock Merchant Guild's price, they would lose at least 20% of their profits this year. Bang! Suddenly, they heard a loud noise coming from behind them. They were shocked and looked back. Suddenly, they saw that a huge pit had appeared at the entrance of Shamrock Merchant Guild paved with 100 jade slabs that they had just walked through. A young man was standing in this pit. It was the young man who had just passed by them. The other party was dressed in a moon-white noble attire. His black hair fluttered in the wind as he stood quietly in the pothole. A terrifying aura emanated from his body, as if he was an unsheathed sword that was stuck in the ground. Someone actually dares to cause trouble in front of Shamrock Merchant Guild. Doesn't he know that the power behind Shamrock Merchant Guild is Duke Nahum's family? The young man's face was full of shock. Someone actually dared to cause trouble for Shamrock Merchant Guild. Behind Shamrock Merchant Guild was the colossus that was the Nahum family. As one of the largest aristocratic families in the Purple Moon Kingdom that had produced a king-tier master, the Nahum family's strength was unquestionable. There were several desolate blood warriors in the family, and there were more than 10 barbarian blood warriors. Their strength was written in blood. Once, a merchant family with a wild blood warrior in charge had a conflict with this family. However, in just a few days, the Nahum family had uprooted the Nahum family. One could imagine how terrifying the Nahum family was. Now, someone actually dared to challenge this family. In his opinion, this was simply inconceivable. In his heart, although he was extremely dissatisfied with Shamrock Merchant Guild because of their expensive medicinal herbs, he was still not optimistic about the man who challenged Shamrock Merchant Guild. Shamrock Merchant Guild was simply unshakable. "Who's there?" At the entrance of Shamrock Merchant Guild, more than 10 people rushed out almost immediately after the noise was made. All of them were wearing battle armor. They were in charge of Shamrock Merchant Guild's security today. Each of them had a faint, murderous aura. There was no doubt that this was a group of wild blood warriors who had seen blood and killed people before. Moreover, each and every one of them was brimming with energy, and their gazes were sharp and spirited. Even the weakest of them had the strength of a ferocious blood warrior. Only a clan with an extremely deep foundation like the Naim clan would dare to use ferocious blood warriors as guards. "How dare you cause trouble in the Shamrock Chamber of Commerce?" Among the dozen people, a middle-aged man looked coldly at Gray. He originally thought that it would be an extremely peaceful day. After all, it had been many years since anyone dared to cause trouble in Shamrock Merchant Guild. He did not expect that he would encounter it, and it was actually just one person. He glanced at the pothole under Gray's feet and narrowed his eyes imperceptibly. To be able to create such a pothole on the stone floor, this person's strength was not weak. However, this was Shamrock Merchant Guild, the Shamrock Merchant Guild that belonged to the Nahum family. Naturally, he could not show weakness here. "Who are you?" His face was filled with anger and his eyes were cold. The air was filled with coldness, as if it could freeze Gray into an ice sculpture at any time. This was not a seemed, but a fact. The middle-aged man cultivated the Frost Tiger blood art and had the strength of a wild blood warrior. Once he attacked, it was enough to freeze more than 10 people into ice sculptures. "Those who are here to collect debts, call out your guild's president." Being stared at by the other party's cold eyes, Gray's expression was calm. After experiencing difficult battles on the battlefield, this kind of aura was child's play. How could it possibly intimidate him? As for the coldness in the air, Gray did not care. Even a first desolate grade wild blood warrior could not damage his strong defense, so how could the middle-aged man's ice ability hurt him? Collect debts? What a joke. Shamrock Merchant Guild owes you anything? How dare you cause trouble in Shamrock Merchant Guild? Capture him. The middle-aged man ordered the blood warriors who followed him. Immediately, more than 10 blood warriors pulled out their weapons and pounced on Gray. Each of them had the strength of a wild blood warrior. More than 10 magic power weapons activated various abilities and attacked Gray from all directions. Even with more than 10 people attacking, there was no chaos. Several people in front and several behind, and they could change positions at any time. Their cooperation was very good, and one could tell at a glance that they had practiced siege techniques. Gray did not even look at these people. Suddenly, more than 10 purple lightning snakes, each as thick as a finger, sputtered in all directions with him as the center. Bang, bang, bang. The finger-thick lightning was extremely small, but when it hit the bodies of more than 10 people, it was like a huge thunderbolt in the sky. The bodies of more than 10 people were all charred and sent flying. They landed heavily on the ground, and could not get up for a long time. Only their rising and falling chests showed that although these people were heavily injured, they were not dead. This was deliberately done by Gray. Otherwise, with his current berserker blood at the 2nd level, the power of the lightning he displayed would not be able to keep these people, who only had the strength of a wild blood warrior, alive. These people were just small fries who were following orders. Gray did not have the intention to bicker with them. Whoosh, just as Gray repelled these people, a white cold air suddenly appeared and surrounded Gray. It was less than a meter away from Gray. From beginning to end, the middle-aged man had never thought of relying on these dozen or so people to capture Gray. He had ordered these dozen or so people to attack Gray in order to distract him so that he wouldn't be able to take care of anything else. The final trump card was himself. However, he obviously overestimated himself. In the face of absolute power, all calculations were useless. Crackle! Just as the cold air was about to reach Gray, a bolt of purple lightning appeared and struck the cold air. The cold air dissipated instantly, but the purple lightning didn't lose its momentum and struck the middle-aged man. Bang! The middle-aged man was also sent flying with his body charred. In just a short while, many merchants had appeared in the surroundings. They were all merchants who came to the Chamber of Commerce to do business, and among them was the pair of siblings. They were watching from afar, looking at Gray as if they were looking at a monster. They didn't look optimistic about him. Even when they saw Gray severely injuring the guards of Shamrock Chamber of Commerce and making them unable to get up, their expressions did not change because they knew that Shamrock Chamber of Commerce was not limited to this. Sure enough, soon dozens of people appeared at the entrance of the Chamber of Commerce. Each of them had a powerful aura and their eyes were cold. They looked at Gray with hostility. Chapter 460. How dare you cause trouble in the Clover Chamber of Commerce? A man rushed to the front. He was dressed in gray battle armor and had 2 tufts of beard on his face. At this moment, the 2 tufts of beard were raised in anger. When he was 30 meters away from Gray, he used his blood fiend ability. The moisture in the air condensed into a large amount of water. The large amount of water gathered and finally turned into a huge water snake. The water snake's huge tail whipped the ground, causing a serious crack to appear on the stone floor. Then, it suddenly jumped out from the ground, revealing its sharp fangs and biting towards Gray. He was a barbarian blood warrior. His blood fiend ability was to control water. To be precise, his ability was to transform water into a snake to attack his target. The huge water snake slithered on the ground at an extremely fast speed. In an instant, it was already close to Gray. It opened its ferocious mouth, as if it wanted to swallow Gray whole. Gray did not move, but in front of him, 2 zigzagging purple lightning appeared. One attacked the water snake. The water snake's huge body exploded with a loud bang and sputtered on the square with a powerful force. Immediately, potholes were left on the stone floor of the square. The other attacked the man in gray battle armor. The man in gray battle armor's expression changed, and he hurriedly dodged. However, the speed of the lightning was too fast and his body was grazed by it. He retreated again and again. The places on his body that were struck by the lightning were charred black. He touched the ground with his spear to support himself so that he did not fall. After all, he was a barbarian blood warrior. Obviously, he was not comparable to those people in front of him. However, he still suffered heavy injuries. He clenched his teeth and created another water snake to attack Gray. "We'll help you." 2 more figures rushed out from the Clover Chamber of Commerce. One was dressed in yellow battle armor and the other in white battle armor. They attacked Gray together. The one dressed in yellow battle armor was a man. He stomped his foot and a large number of earth spikes pierced through the stone floor and extended towards Gray. The one dressed in white battle armor was a woman. Under her shadow, a large number of shadows appeared and gave birth to shadow balls that attacked Gray. At the same time, 3 terrifying blood fiends attacked Gray at the same time. Gray's expression did not change. The 2 people who had appeared later were not weak. They had both reached the realm of berserker blood warriors. It was enough to show how much importance the Nahum family placed on this place. However, this level of strength was still not enough for him. In front of him, a long green river appeared. Cold air filled the air, wind blades rose and fell, and the ground under his feet was frozen solid. The earth spikes couldn't pierce through the ice and couldn't reach Gray's feet at all. The balls formed by the shadow substance were all shattered, and the water snakes turned into ice sculptures and were split into several pieces. Under Gray's control, the ice wind blades spread out to strike the 3 of them. Their combat suits were broken and they were sent flying. It took them a long time to get up. "Gray Fergus, you're Gray Fergus." Seeing that the 3 berserker blood warriors had been defeated in a few moments, the dozens of people from Clover Chamber of Commerce who had followed them all changed their expressions. Among them, a blond man looked at Gray with shock in his eyes. Was Gray's reputation in the Purple Moon Kingdom now big? Very big. However, Gray rarely participated in aristocratic gatherings. There were very few people who had actually seen Gray before. In addition, there were no means of photos in this world, so there weren't many people who knew about Gray. However, Gray's icy wind blade ability had long been circulated, and there was only one of its kind. Therefore, when Gray used his icy wind blade ability, there were immediately people who recognized it. Gray Fergus? Could it be that Earl Fergus who was recently enfeoffed by the royal family? It's actually him. I heard that this Earl Fergus is young, but his strength is extremely strong. It's true. How did he become enemies with Clover Chamber of Commerce? The surrounding merchants were all well informed and immediately guessed Gray's identity. Earl Fergus, why did you attack Clover Chamber of Commerce? Why are you so heavy-handed? At this time, there were already people from Clover Chamber of Commerce who had helped the 3 Berserker Blood Warriors up and found that all 3 of them were seriously injured. Someone angrily questioned Gray. Why? Don't you know what Clover Chamber of Commerce has done? Gray snorted. Clover Chamber of Commerce had maliciously suppressed the Fergus family, causing the Fergus family to suffer heavy losses. Now they actually came to ask him about something. It was too funny. President? Someone looked at the blond man in confusion, obviously not knowing the reason. The blond man was about 40 years old, and his name was Lambert Naeem. Seeing that a few people were looking at him, his expression turned slightly ugly. Gray Fergus, Clover Chamber of Commerce is a chamber of commerce directly under the Nahum family. Are you sure you want to become enemies with the Nahum family? He naturally knew why Gray had come looking for him. After all, he had received orders from above to suppress the Fergus family's shop. However, he didn't think that Gray would use such a direct method and come knocking on his door. Sister, it must be because of the suppression of the Fergus family's shop. The eyes of the younger brother, Quinton Leandra, lit up as he thought of the reason. Before the Dawn Chamber of Commerce decided to work with Clover Chamber of Commerce, they had also considered working with the Fergus family. However, after learning that the Fergus family had been suppressed by Clover Chamber of Commerce and suffered heavy losses, they gave up. After all, it wasn't worth it to become enemies with Clover Chamber of Commerce over this. You don't know what's good for you. Even now, you still dare to threaten me. The look in Gray's eyes suddenly turned cold. He could see that the decision to maliciously suppress the Fergus family was probably made by the chairman of Clover Chamber of Commerce himself. His face was covered in frost. His figure flashed as he quickly closed in on the chairman of Clover Chamber of Commerce. What are you trying to do? Stop him. Many people in Clover Chamber of Commerce didn't know the reason behind this, but they naturally couldn't let Gray attack the chairman of their Chamber of Commerce. They all moved to stop him. Gray's response was simple and crude. Icy wind blades filled the air, and anyone who attacked him was sent flying with heavy injuries. Whoosh! Seeing Gray rushing over, the chairman of Clover Chamber of Commerce, Lambert Naeem, hurriedly retreated and used his blood beast ability to block him. Orange-red flames spun and turned into a huge flaming flower that crashed into Gray. It actually had the power of a second-tier barbarian. As expected of the chairman of a large chamber of commerce, his combat power was even stronger than the 3 barbarian blood warriors. But it was still not enough. The icy wind blades stirred and the flaming flower was extinguished. Lambert Naeem was injured all over and was frozen into an ice sculpture. Gray walked over and melted the ice. He grabbed Lambert's neck with one hand and lifted him up like an eagle grabbing a chick. You dare to attack the Fergus family? Holding Lambert with his left hand, Gray slapped him hard with his right hand. The left side of Lambert's face immediately swelled up, and a bloody tooth flew out. Gray Fergus, the Nahum family won't let you off for treating me like this today. With half his face swollen, Lambert Naeem's speech was a little unclear. He tried to put on a strong front. "You still dare to threaten me?" Gray's eyes were cold. He slapped him again, and a few more bloody teeth fell out. The other half of Lambert's face was also swollen. You actually dare to treat me like this? Just you wait." Lambert Naeem was completely mad with anger. As a member of the Duke's family, he had the strength of a second-tier barbarian. When had he ever suffered such humiliation? His eyes were bloodshot as he gritted his teeth and looked at Gray. He was missing a few teeth and his mouth couldn't be sealed. Blood even seeped out of his mouth. "Looks like your Nahum family is really used to being high and mighty." Gray's eyes were cold. His empty hand reached for the sword at his waist. With a clang, the sword was unsheathed. What do you want to do?" Lambert Naeem struggled in fear as he looked at the unsheathed sword in Gray's hand. But he was seriously injured and couldn't break free. "Stop!" Many people from the Clover Chamber of Commerce struggled to get up and stop him, but they were all seriously injured. They staggered and couldn't even stand properly. Gray's eyes were cold as he waved his sword. Poof! Blood spurted out. An arm flew high into the air and landed on the square, which was already covered in broken stone slabs and mud. It rolled a few times before coming to a stop. He actually cut off President Lambert's right hand. The people from the Clover Chamber of Commerce and the surrounding merchants were all dumbfounded. They hadn't expected Gray to dare do such a thing. He had actually cut off the arm of the Clover Chamber of Commerce's president. This enmity was huge. You actually cut off my right hand. Just you wait, the Nahum family will definitely avenge me," Lambert Naeem said, his face full of hatred as he broke out in a cold sweat. "Don't worry, my next stop is your Nahum family." Sheathing his sword, Gray sneered as he looked at the severed arm. A flame appeared and instantly charred the arm. With the example of the Wallen family, Edgar Wallen's severed arm had been reattached, so he naturally couldn't leave it intact. Even the Wallen family could reattach a severed arm, let alone the Nahum family. If that was the case, cutting off Lambert's arm would be meaningless. Carrying Lambert, Gray turned and left. He covered 10 meters with each step, quickly heading in the direction of the Nahum family. "Put down the president!" Behind him, the other people from the Clover Chamber of Commerce were full of anger, but they were powerless to stop him. They had no courage or strength. They knew that even if the Nahum family suppressed Gray Fergus later, the Clover Chamber of Commerce would probably become a laughingstock in the future. Their headquarters would be destroyed, and even their president would be taken away. "Let's go to the Fergus family." Leander, the elder sister of the two siblings, turned and said. Why are we going to the Fergus family?" Quentin Leander asked doubtfully. "Don't we need herbs? The Fergus family happens to have them," Leander said with a smile. "But the Fergus family is now in conflict with the Nahum family. If we have dealings with the Fergus family now, we will definitely be suppressed by the Nahum family." Quentin Leander had a worried look. Looking at Gray and Fergus, they should be very confident. "But just in case, we can go to Fergus City first and have people pay close attention to the news of Naeem City." Leander's beautiful face showed a sly smile. "If the Fergus family gets through this, then we will immediately trade with the Fergus family. If not, we have no loss." Chapter 461. With the departure of Leandre and Quentin. Leandre, the other onlookers also left. Their faces were full of surprise. It was the first time in so many years that they had seen someone provoke the Nahum family like this. Of course, they weren't optimistic about Gray's chances. He was just a newly promoted earl. It was impossible for him to have the ability to contend with a duke's family like the Naeem family. It was like a wild wolf wanting to challenge a fierce beast. 2 days later, Gray entered the Nahum territory. He did not use teleportation. Although the Wallen family knew that Gray had a teleportation magic weapon in his hand, they did not spread the news. It was not until recently that Gray learned that the royal family had issued a gag order to the Wallen family to protect Gray, so that the Wallen family could not disclose it. He did not use teleportation to bring the president of the Clover Chamber of Commerce, but with his current speed, it only took him 2 days to enter the Nehem territory at full speed. It was just that along the way, the president of the Clover Chamber of Commerce suffered a lot. In addition, he was seriously injured and could not be treated in time. When the two arrived at the Nehem city, the president was dying. "Gray Fergus, how dare you attack the Chamber of Commerce of the Nehem family?" More than 10 miles away from the Nehem city, Gray, who was carrying the president of the Clover Chamber of Commerce, was stopped by a group of people. The leader of the group was a majestic man in his 50s. He looked at Gray coldly and said in a cold voice. He was the patriarch of the Nehem family, Ajnan Nehem. Gray was not slow all the way, but after all, he could not fly. He took a lot of detours. Before that, a messenger bird had already sent the news back to the Nehem family. That was why Gray was stopped more than 10 miles away from the Nehem city. Why not? Just because it's the Nehem family's Chamber of Commerce? You think too highly of the Nehem family. A cold smile appeared on Gray's face. Since the main character was here, there was no need to keep the president of Shamrock Chamber of Commerce alive. Therefore, he casually threw the dying president of Shamrock Chamber of Commerce at the feet of the people of Nelm family. Lambert, some members of the Nehem family came forward to check on his injuries. When they found out about his injuries, they all glared angrily at Gray. How cruel! Not only did he cut off his arm, he didn't even treat his injuries. The Nehem family was famous for being ruthless to the outside world. They had robbed, killed, and exterminated people. They had done such things quite often. However, they were extremely united internally, and their relationship with each other was more intimate than that of an ordinary large family. It had to be said that this was a very unique family. They were very friendly to their own family members and were full of familial love, but to outsiders, they were ruthless and merciless. Good, very good. After so many years, you're the first person who dares to provoke the Nehem family like this. The head of the Nehem family, Ajnan Nehem, stared coldly at Gray, as if the king of the forest had been provoked by a little mouse. He was extremely angry. The first one? What an honor! Today, let me break the laughable pride of your Nehem family. Gray sneered. The best response to this kind of family that was full of superiority was to trample them under his feet and trample them with all his strength. Arrogant! Do you really think that no one can deal with you just because you have the strength of a desolation grade? First, you hurt a member of the Nehem family, and now you say such words. Even if I cripple you today, the royal family will definitely not stand up for you. 2 old men walked out. One of them was wearing a green battlesuit and had a slightly thin appearance. The other had a medium build, but the muscles all over his body were rather strong. These 2 people were Gray's old acquaintances. Back in Nehem City, when Gray was recognized by the Nehem family, he was almost besieged by these 2 people. However, he was stopped by Sophia in the end. Now, these 2 people were preparing to join forces to besiege Gray again. Swoosh, swoosh. The 2 of them attacked at the same time. 2 huge green wind blades, more than 10 meters long and several meters wide, whizzed out. Along the way, a large number of trees fell. Under the scattered wind blades, deep scratches were left on the ground. Before they even got close, a terrifyingly sharp aura locked onto Gray. Facing the terrifying attack, Gray's expression did not change at all. On the battlefield, he could already rely on his terrifying defense to resist the siege of 2 desolation blood warriors, let alone now. Gotcha! 2 small black fog rivers appeared and blocked the 2 huge wind blades. The 2 wind blades fell into the black fog rivers. Although they stirred up waves, they eventually quieted down. Moreover, the 2 black fog rivers did not dissipate. Under Gray's control, They attacked the two old men from the left and right respectively. Poof, poof. A terrifying pothole appeared where the two old men had been standing. Near the potholes, rocks and trees had all disappeared. Relying on the affinity body constitution, his destructive power is indeed comparable to a level 2 desolation level. Not far away, the two old men's faces showed a hint of surprise. Gray had the affinity body constitution and had many bloodlines in his body. His strongest combat power could reach level 2 desolation level. The Warner Nahum brothers had naturally told the Nahum family, "Be careful, don't get hit by the attack." The two of them were not frightened by Gray. Instead, after a dignified look flashed across their faces, their figures flickered and pounced on Gray from both sides. A battle was not simply a competition of destructive power. Speed, defense, combat skills, and many other aspects would also affect the final outcome of the battle. As members of the Nahum family, the blood technique they cultivated was extremely fast. Although it was not as fast as the blood technique of the Scarlet Kingdom's royal family, it was only slightly slower. This was why they dared to fight Gray even though they knew that Gray's combat power had reached level 2 desolation level. So what if his destructive power was strong? As long as the attack could not reach him, it would be useless no matter how strong it was. Whoosh! In an instant, the two old men appeared on both sides of Gray. The long swords in their hands shone with a green light and emitted an ear-piercing buzzing sound. They stabbed towards Gray at the same time. Gray did not move. He did not dodge because he knew that he could not dodge with his speed. After all, he was at level 2 barbarian level. Naturally, his speed was only at level 2 barbarian level. However, even if he could not dodge, it did not mean that he did not have a way to deal with it. One on the left and one on the right, two streaks of black fog whipped towards the two old men like two huge snake tails. Chi-chi. Two deep ravines appeared on the ground under the impact of the black fog. The two old men once again relied on their speed to dodge the attack, and attacked Gray from another direction. Humph! Gray snorted. Suddenly, more than 10 streaks of black fog appeared and attacked the two old men from all directions. They covered all the directions they could dodge. Puff, puff. Every direction was blocked. The two old men could no longer dodge. They were each hit by a streak of black fog. Bloody wounds appeared on their bodies, and they were sent flying. The two old men fought Gray with their advantage in speed. This strategy was not wrong. Speed was indeed Gray's weakness. The only mistake was that the other party had picked the wrong person. If they were faced with Jellenway Austin's simplistic and straightforward blood fiend ability, this method would naturally be very effective. However, the black fog could be used separately or together. It could even be used as a defensive method. It was not suitable for the black fog, which had a variety of combat methods. Since you're fast, I'll split up the blood fiend ability and cover a large area. Whoosh! Gray's attack did not end there. Although he could not kill the old men, he could severely injure or even cripple them. It was just like what the old men had said before. The black fog, which had originally been divided into more than 10 streaks, quickly combined into 2 long rivers of black fog and attacked the two old men. The two old men's expressions changed. If they were hit by the 2 long rivers of black fog, they would probably be seriously injured and would have to lie in bed for a few months. Puff, puff. Just as the long rivers of black fog were about to hit the two old men, 2 green tornadoes appeared and collided with the long rivers of black fog. They blocked the long rivers of black fog and completely crushed them, saving the two old men. At that moment, an old man appeared in the field. He wore green clothes and had a white face without a beard. His eyes were extremely sharp, and they were as sharp as an eagle's. Being stared at by him was like being stared at by a predator. Desolate level, second level. Gray narrowed his eyes. Only a second-level desolate level blood warrior could easily block his attack, which was at the second level of desolate level. However, his expression did not change much. It would be strange if there was no second-level desolate level existence in such a large family that had once produced a king-level expert. How many years has it been since the Nahum family became a dukedom? This is the first time someone dares to bully us. The old man in green did not attack Gray immediately. Instead, he stared at Gray with cold eyes. You're lucky to have an affinity system and some strength. You dare to provoke the Nahum family? It seems that the Nahum family has not made a move for many years, and the outside world has forgotten to fear the Nahum family. His voice was cold and the coldness in his eyes seemed to be able to freeze Gray. No, it's the Nahum family who thinks too highly of themselves. Gray did not feel the slightest bit of fear when he met the old man's gaze. Robbery, coercion, and bribery. Is there anything the Nahum family doesn't dare to do? Do you really think that everyone is afraid of the Nahum family? Who gave you the confidence to not be afraid of the Nahum family? With your combat strength that barely reaches the second level of desolate level? The old man in green stared at Gray with a trace of disdain in his eyes. Green light circled around him, and wild winds swirled around him. He looked like the god of storms. As a second-level desolate level existence who had been at this level for a long time, the old man did not think much of Lin Fan's combat strength that barely reached the second level. Tap, tap, tap. At this moment, the sound of footsteps came from the forest behind Gray. The footsteps were not loud, but the people present were not ordinary people. Naturally, they would not miss the sound of the footstep. The azure-clothed elder and the other members of the Nahum family looked over and immediately saw a figure walking over from the forest behind Gray at a moderate pace. It was a slender figure. He wore ordinary clothes and had a sword hanging from his waist. The only thing special about him was the silver metal mask on his face. The pupils of the metal mask were inlaid with transparent red crystals, making it hard for people to see clearly. Chapter 462. Who are you? The green-robed elder shouted. He did not feel the slightest bit of aura from this person, but he could not help but become alert. How could someone who dared to appear at this time be an ordinary person? Instinctively, he felt that this person was not simple. Pa. The silver-masked man did not answer. Instead, he walked step by step towards Gray. Finally, he stood side by side with Gray. Their purpose of advancing and retreating together was self-evident. Which family are you from? Are you sure you want to stand up for him? The green-clothed elder's voice turned cold when he did not get a reply. However, the silver-masked man stood side by side with Gray and still had no intention of speaking. You have to think carefully. Is it worth it to make an enemy out of the Nahum family for him? Being ignored, the green-clothed elder's voice turned cold. Whoosh! Still not getting a reply, the green-clothed elder directly attacked. He unsheathed his sword and slashed in the air. Suddenly, a huge wind blade attacked Gray. He also attacked Gray with a wind blade, but the wind blade he slashed out was much stronger than the previous two desolate blood elders. The huge wind blade looked like it was made of green metal. It was extremely wide, and there were many small wind blades on its surface. Along the way, trees collapsed and the ground was filled with crisscrossing marks. This kind of power was much stronger than Gray's black fog, which had barely reached the second level of the desolated level. This was also the reason why the other party did not take Gray seriously. The power of the Blood Fiend was stronger than Gray's. In addition, its speed and strength were superior to Gray's. He had the strength to not take Gray seriously. Instead, he looked more at the masked man who had suddenly appeared. He could not see through this man. Whoosh! Just as the wind blade was about to hit Gray, the silver-masked man beside Gray moved. Whoosh! He took a step forward and blocked Gray's path. He unsheathed his sword and slashed. The whole action was done in one breath. Gotcha! The huge wind blade was like a piece of glass that had collided with a rock. With the center as the center, a huge crack appeared. The crack spread and eventually it completely collapsed. The wind blade, which had reached the second level of the desolated level, was shattered by the masked man's blade. Broken wind blades sputtered in all directions. The ground was crisscrossed with rocks and dirt, but Gray, who was behind the man with the silver metal mask, was not harmed at all. He actually blocked it? In the distance, the Nahum family looked at the silver-masked man with astonishment. To be able to block an attack from a desolate grade level 2, the opponent's strength should be at least at this level. Behind Gray Fergus, there was an expert who was at least in the second level of the desolation grade. Although he had vaguely guessed that the opponent's strength was not weak when he appeared, he still couldn't help but feel shocked when the opponent displayed the battle strength of at least level 2 of the desolation grade. They finally felt that the development of the situation was out of their control. Perhaps the Nahum family would suffer a huge loss today and become a joke among the nobles of the Purple Moon Kingdom. The blade in his hand is a broken blade. As the flying rocks fell, the silhouette of the man with the silver metal mask became clear. Suddenly, Warner Nahum exclaimed. Warner Nahum and Nathan Nahum, who were the two strongest members of the younger generation of the Nahum family, were naturally brought along for this opportunity to witness a battle between experts. Previously, due to the flying rocks blocking their field of vision, the members of the Nahum family were unable to clearly see that the weapon in the other party's hand was a broken sword. A broken blade? A desolate grade level 2 expert is holding a broken blade? The Nahum family almost thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. A level 2 desolation level expert was definitely a top-notch expert no matter which family he was in. However, such an expert's weapon was a broken saber. What kind of family would give a level 2 desolation level expert a broken saber? Behind the man with the silver metal mask, Gray's expression was calm. He was not surprised that the man with the silver metal mask could block the wind blade. The man with the silver metal mask was the former King-grade expert, Stanley Grinton. A King-grade expert who only had physical strength would at least have the combat power of a desolate grade level 3 expert. Blocking a desolate grade level 2 wind blade was not a problem. As for the silver metal mask on the man's face, it was given to Gray by Francis when he left the Purple Moon Kingdom's Imperial City. This was a special magic weapon. Although it did not have any attack power, its value was far above ordinary bronze magic weapons. This mask could conceal the aura on the body and prevent it from being exposed. It was practically tailor-made for Stanley Grinton. Not only could it conceal Stanley Grinton's face, but it could also conceal his King-grade aura. Fighting me with a broken blade, are you looking down on me? The green-robed elder's face was ashen. It was common knowledge that a broken magic weapon's power would be greatly reduced. Facing him with a broken magic weapon, what else could it be other than looking down on him? Stanley Grinton naturally did not have rich feelings for using a broken blade to show his contempt for his opponent. However, Stanley Grinton obviously could not explain himself. Good. Since you dare to make an enemy of the Nahum family, let me see how strong you are. The green-robed elder was so angry that he laughed. Woo-woo! A huge green tornado appeared, sweeping up a large amount of rocks and giant trees. It carried a terrifying gust of wind, and was extremely powerful as it charged towards Stanley Grinton. This was a terrifying attack, and its power was clearly much stronger than the wind blade from before. If the wind blade was the elder's normal attack, then this green tornado was his trump card. Whoosh! In response, Stanley Grinton's approach was still simple and crude. He raised the broken blade in his hand and slashed down. Crack! The huge tornado was split into two halves by his blade. The raging wind stopped abruptly, and the earth, rocks, and trees that were swept up fell with a loud crash. During this process, Stanley Grinton moved. Whoosh! Like a bolt of lightning, Stanley Grinton pounced towards the green-robed elder. Whoosh! The green-robed elder retreated to dodge, but he was surprised to find that he, who had always been proud of his speed, was actually slower than Stanley Grinton. The distance between him and Stanley Grinton was rapidly closing. As far as he knew, the Crimson Kingdom's royal family's blood technique was the only thing that could surpass his speed within the same realm. However, it was clear that the other party did not cultivate this blood technique. This gave him a bad feeling. What he cultivated was not the Crimson Kingdom's blood technique, but he was faster than him. Did that not mean that the other party's strength was not limited to the second level of the desolate level? However, before he could ask the question, Stanley Grinton was already in front of him. He gritted his teeth, and the sword in his hand shone with a green light and made a buzzing sound. He slashed at Stanley Grinton. At the same time, Stanley Grinton slashed with the broken blade in his hand. Clang! Puff! The green-robed elder's sword was knocked away by a huge force. The broken blade slashed across the green-robed elder's body. The green-robed elder immediately flew backward, blood splattering everywhere. He fell more than 100 meters away. Lord Baird is injured? The Nahum family, including the head of the family, Stanley Grinton, could not help but look pale. There was unconcealable shock on their faces. Lord Baird, who was at the second level of the King stage, had been defeated. Moreover, he had been defeated after only 3 exchanges. No, to be precise, the other party had only attacked once. In the first 2 attacks, the other party had only blocked Lord Baird's attack. If he could injure Lord Baird, who was at the second level of the desolate level, with 1 attack, did that mean that this person's strength had reached the 3rd level of the desolate level? You're at the 3rd level of the desolate level. In the distance, the injured green-robed elder Baird stood up awkwardly. He glanced at the wounds on his body, and his eyes were filled with fear. His words had confirmed the Nahum family's speculation. The other party was indeed a 3rd-level desolate level powerhouse. How is that possible? How could this guy know a 3rd-level desolate level powerhouse, and be willing to stand up for him? Warner Nahum's face was filled with shock and anger. After Gray's identity was exposed, he had naturally investigated Gray in detail. As far as he knew, Gray's original family was only a feudal aristocrat. It was impossible for them to have crossed paths with such a powerhouse. I've already said that we shouldn't continue to be enemies with Gray Fergus. Nathan Nahum's eyes were filled with fear. After returning from the Jewel Kingdom, he had already proposed not to be enemies with Gray Fergus. He felt that if they continued to be enemies with Gray Fergus, the Nahum family would regret it in the future. Unfortunately, whether it was his father, his elder brother, or the other elders of the family, none of them took his proposal seriously. Now, his worries had become a reality. Now, the other party had the strength to contend with the Nahum family. Whoosh! Stanley Grinton did not respond. Instead, he pounced on the green-robed elder. As a controlled object with the ability to control corpses, he had no other emotions other than a certain ability to carry out orders. Naturally, he would not stop to introduce himself to satisfy the curiosity of the green-robed elder and the others. He would only faithfully carry out Gray's orders. Whoosh! Under Gray's command, Stanley Glinton's body flashed like a bolt of lightning as he pounced on the green-clothed elder. Gray was not satisfied with the extent of the green-clothed elder's injuries. Seeing that Stanley Grinton was getting closer and closer to the green-robed elder, at this moment, boom! A terrible loud noise suddenly sounded. Stanley Grinton, who was pouncing forward, suddenly flew backward. His body seemed to have been hit by a train. Countless trees and rocks were smashed, and he flew hundreds of meters away. Along the way, an exaggerated gully that stretched hundreds of meters appeared. The gully was wide and deep. The nearby trees were crushed by an invisible edge, and a large area collapsed. The ground was full of crisscrossing marks, each of which was several meters deep. Chapter 463. The long ravine was wide and deep, extending for hundreds of meters, like a dried-up river. At one end of the ravine, Baird Nahum, the blue-clothed old man with an injury on his chest, was holding a short sword in his hand. The short sword was about half a meter long and was entirely blue. There were many golden rune patterns on its surface. Just now, Baird Naim had slashed with this short sword, sending Stanley Grinton flying and leaving behind this ravine that was hundreds of meters long. Kacha. Suddenly, a crisp sound came from the short sword in Baird Naim's hand. Then, cracks quickly appeared on the short sword in Baird Naim's hand. In the end, as if the entire sword had completed its mission, it completely shattered into powder and drifted away. Clearly, this was a forbidden weapon. This was a forbidden weapon sealed with the power of a king-level powerhouse's attack. The Nahum family hasn't been in such a sorry state for hundreds of years. You're very good. You actually forced my Nahum family to use a forbidden weapon. The blue-clothed old man looked coldly at Gray, his voice cold. His heart was dripping blood. As a family that had once produced a king-level powerhouse, the family naturally possessed forbidden weapons. However, they were extremely few in number, only a few. Moreover, every time one was used, there would be one less. There was no way to replenish them unless another king-level powerhouse appeared in the family. He had never imagined that the other party would be so difficult to deal with. He was actually able to invite a third-level desolate-level powerhouse. In order to deal with the other party, he had no choice but to use a forbidden weapon. Gray Fergus, you caused my Nahum family to lose a forbidden weapon. Use the magic weapon you obtained from the ghost merchant as compensation. The Nahum family's patriarch, Adjanon Naim, said angrily. His heart was also dripping blood. Father, this is letting him off too easily. He cut off one of Uncle Lambert's arms. He must leave one of his arms behind. Warner Nahum said coldly. After returning to the Nahum family from the Jewel Kingdom, he had already suggested to the family that they assassinate Gray. The higher-ups of the family had also been persuaded, but he did not expect that Gray would take the initiative to come to them before they could carry out the plan. As for letting the Clover Chamber of Commerce suppress the Fergus family, it was just a matter of convenience. He didn't take it seriously at all. He also didn't think that Gray would take the initiative to go to the Nahum family to ask for an explanation. Yes, Master Warner is right. We can't let him go just like that. We must cut off one of his arms to avenge Lambert. He provoked us first. Even if we report this to the royal family, we must occupy him. An elder of the Naim clan said loudly. Hand over the magical weapon, and then cut off one of your arms. Otherwise, you won't be able to walk out of Neum today. Another elder of the Naim clan clamored. Seems like you've got me? Looking at the Nahum family who were already discussing compensation, Gray's face bloomed with a mocking smile. He looked at this group of people as if he was looking at a clown. Gray Fergus, I admit that the Nahum family underestimated you before. You actually have a third-level desolate grade backer behind you. However, the background of a duke's family is not something you can imagine. You only have one path now, and that is to cut off one of your arms and hand over that magical weapon. The head of the Nahum family, Adjanon Naim, looked coldly at Gray and said, after being hit by a forbidden weapon, even if he is a third-level desolate grade, he will definitely be heavily injured. He no longer has the strength to fight. You have no choice. The green-clothed elder, Baird Naim, said confidently. If he didn't know that this matter had already attracted the attention of the royal family, what he wanted to do was not just to make the other party compensate and cut off one of his arms, but to directly kill the other party here. No longer has the strength to fight? The mocking expression on Gray's face became even more obvious. Pa. At the end of the several hundred-meter-long ravine, a figure stood up. His clothes were almost completely tattered, and his exposed skin was filled with a silvery white color. His entire person seemed to have been poured with silver. He rushed over at an extremely fast speed, and his footsteps were steady as if he had not been injured at all. How can this be? How can he only suffer such a minor injury after being hit by a forbidden weapon? Some people in the Nahum family cried out in alarm, while others remained silent, but their faces turned pale. The people present were not ordinary people, and their eyesight was naturally excellent. Even though they were several hundred meters away, they could still clearly see the situation on Stanley Grinton's body. At this moment, although the other party's clothes were tattered, there were no signs of serious injuries. The only wound on his body was on his chest, but it was obvious that it was not a serious injury. "Now, do you still think you can take me down?" Gray's gaze swept across the Nahum family, and a cold smile appeared on his face. A family that had once produced a king-level expert would definitely have a forbidden weapon in their hands, so Gray had been on guard from the very beginning. When he saw the azure-clothed elder, Baird Naim, take out a azure-colored longsword covered in runes, he immediately made the decision to use his metallization ability on Stanley Grinton. As a king-level expert in his previous life, Stanley Grinton's own defense was already extremely terrifying. After metallization, his defense had been greatly enhanced, and his defense immediately jumped to the level of a king-level expert who specialized in defense. How could a forbidden weapon be able to seriously injure such a level of defense? Leaving a wound on his body was already the limit. After all, strictly speaking, the power of a forbidden weapon was still slightly inferior to the power of a true king-level expert. He definitely has a defensive silver-grade magic weapon on him. "You gave that magic weapon to him?" Baird Naim asked in a deep voice. He was well aware of the power of a forbidden weapon. Even a third-level desolate-grade expert would not be able to suffer such a minor injury from a forbidden weapon. The only explanation was that the other party had a silver-grade magic weapon in his hand, and he had relied on the defense of this magic weapon to block the forbidden weapon's attack. Swish! At this moment, Stanley Grinton had already quickly passed by Gray and charged straight at the azure-clothed elder, Baird Naim. Baird Naim's expression changed, and he frantically dodged, but it was as if he had been locked on, and he could not dodge at all. Pooh! With a slash of the blade, another serious wound appeared on the azure-clothed elder's body, and he flew backward. Stanley Grinton caught up and slashed down with his blade again. Pooh! Another serious wound appeared on the azure-clothed elder's body, and he fell heavily to the ground, creating a crater more than 10 meters in diameter. He was unable to get up for a long time. Stanley Grinton walked up, holding the blade in his right hand and grabbing the elder's neck with his left hand. He lifted the elder up like he was grabbing a chick and walked toward Gray. "Stop! What are you doing? Let go of Lord Baird." The other members of the Naim family were shocked and furious. Many of them used their blood beast ability, roaring as they pounced toward Stanley Grinton. Bang bang! Gray attacked, and the black mist turned into huge black whips one after another, lashing out at the people who had pounced. These people immediately flew backward at a speed faster than when they had charged out, falling to the ground. The flesh on their bodies where they had been lashed disappeared, and blood flowed out. Seeing the miserable state of their companions, the other members of the Nahum family, who had been charging forward in anger, suddenly stopped in their tracks. They could neither charge forward nor retreat. "Stop! Let go of Lord Baird." The head of the Nahum family, Ajna Naim, exuded a strong sense of majesty as he said with a livid face. Knowing that Gray had attacked them, the Nahum family rubbed their palms together. Not only did they invite the clan elder, who had the strength of a second-grade desolate level, who had not fought for a long time, but they even brought along their forbidden weapon. They were fully prepared. However, even under such circumstances, they were still defeated. This was something that he and everyone in the Nahum family had not expected. "Do I have to let go just because you told me to? Are you used to giving orders? Even now, you're still using a commanding tone?" Gray coldly glanced at him, then looked at the other members of the Nahum family, and finally, his gaze fell on Warner Nahum. At this moment, Warner Nahum's eyes were spitting fire, but his face showed fear. He shrank into the crowd, and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Gray sneered at Warner Nahum, then pounced over. The latter knew that Gray was coming for him, so he retreated in fear. Bang bang bang! Under the black mist whips, everyone who attacked Gray was severely injured and sent flying backward. Gray caught up with Warner Nahum, and a black mist whips lashed out at him, causing him to be severely injured. He walked over and looked coldly at the severely injured man on the ground. Just now, he heard very clearly that the first person to propose to cut off his arm was Warner Nahum. Obviously, this person's hatred for him was definitely one of the most powerful people in the Nahum family. Gray Fergus, seriously injured, Warner Nahum gritted his teeth when he saw Gray looking down at him from above. Nice look in your eyes. Do you hate me that much? Gray lifted his foot and stepped on one of the man's hands. Suddenly, the sound of bones breaking was heard, followed by a scream like a pig being slaughtered. Gray Fergus, what are you trying to do? If you kill the two of them, the royal family will never let you go. Seeing his son screaming under Gray's foot, the head of the Nahum family, Agenon Nahum, clenched his fists, his eyes filled with anger, and asked angrily, "Now you only dare to use the royal family to threaten me? Where is the glory and dignity of your Nahum family?" Gray curled his lips, moved his foot forward again, and then stomped down hard. The sound of a pig being slaughtered continued to ring out. What do you want? Holding back his anger, the head of the Nahum family, Agenon Nahum, asked. The family's powerhouse and his own son had fallen into the hands of the other party. Because of your Nahum family's suppression, my Fergus family lost a total of 10 million gold coins. What do you think we should do? Gray looked coldly at the head of the Nahum family, Agenon Nahum. Chapter 464. 10 million? Why don't you just rob us? Hearing Gray's words, a Nahum family elder who had just recovered from his injuries spat out a mouthful of blood in anger. The entire wealth of the Fergus family was not even worth 10 million gold coins. The other party had only lost some herbs, yet he wanted to ask for 10 million gold coins in compensation. This was no different from robbery. I'm robbing right now. Gray looked at him as if he was an idiot. You. The Nahum family elder was so angry that he spat out another mouthful of blood and fainted. 10 million gold coins is too much. Your Fergus family's losses can't possibly be that much. The head of the Nahum family, Agenon Nahum, took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. You've made a mistake. I'm not discussing this with you. Gray looked coldly at the head of the Nahum family, Agenon Nahum, and exerted more force with his foot, causing Warner Nahum to cry out miserably again. If you give me 10 million gold coins in compensation, I'll drop this matter. If you don't, then I'll have to make a trip to the Nahum family's residence. Gray Fergus, you're too overbearing. One of the desolate blood warriors who had fought with Gray earlier said angrily. In terms of overbearingness, how can I compare to your Nahum family? Taking by force, coercing, and bribing. Compared to you, I'm ashamed of my inferiority. Gray glanced at the desolate blood warrior and said, Family head, you can't agree to it. At worst, we'll just fight it out with him. Yes, fight it out with him. I don't believe he'll dare to kill us. Some of the Nahum family members hooted. For hundreds of years, the Nahum family had never been so aggrieved. Someone had actually come knocking on their door and forced to pay compensation. This made them, who had always been proud of the Nahum family, unable to accept it. Pung, pung, pung. What welcomed them were a couple of black mist whips. Under the attack of the black mist whips, they were severely injured and sent flying backwards without being able to resist at all. Gray was more than happy to tear apart the pride and arrogance of these people. Stop. The Nahum family is willing to pay compensation. The Nahum family gnashed their teeth as they looked at Baird Naim, who was held in Stanley Grinton's hands without any ability to resist, and then looked at Warner Nahum, who was screaming miserably at Gray's feet. 10 million gold coins was not a small sum for the Nahum family. Of course, the main reason was the humiliation. The Nahum family had been a duke family for hundreds of years, but when had they ever suffered such humiliation? Damn it, hearing that the head of the Nahum family, Adjana-Naim, had agreed to compensate, the faces of many Nahum family members turned ashen. Their fingernails dug into their flesh as a deep sense of humiliation surfaced in their hearts. Some of the older generation were both ashamed and angry, so angry that they vomited blood. They glared at Gray as if they wanted to kill someone. Get it as soon as possible. If you play any tricks, you know the consequences. Gray's expression did not change in the slightest in the face of the hateful gazes. Now that they knew about humiliation and anger, did they know about the humiliation and anger of the families that had been forcefully seized by the head of the Naim family, the families that had been maliciously suppressed by the Nahum family, and the families that had been exterminated because of the Nahum family? Of course, Gray had no intention of seeking justice for the families that had been oppressed by the Nahum family. After all, those families had nothing to do with him. The vegetation on the ground was forcibly cut off, and a pile of glittering purple-black magic coins was piled up there. There were no less than 100,000 magic coins, making it look like a small purple-black mountain. Gray walked over, and with a touch of his purple ring, the pile of magic coins was collected into the purple ring. I've already given you the compensation you wanted. Release Lord Baird and Warner. The head of the Nahum family, Ajna-Naim, said with a cold face. No problem. Gray gave a slight signal, and Stanley Grinton threw Baird-Naim out. He was not a member of the Nahum family and disdained to go back on his word. Then he looked at Warner-Nahum. Since you want to cripple my arms so much, why don't you have a taste of it too? No. The head of the Nahum family, Ajna-Naim, was shocked and angry. He tried to stop him, but it was too late, and even if he could not stop him. Baird-Naim, who was at the second level of the desolation level, was seriously injured. Now there was no one in the Nahum family who could stop Gray. A black mist appeared and wrapped Warner-Nahum's right arm. In just an instant, Warner-Nahum's right arm was severed at the base and completely dissipated. Naturally, there was nothing much to say to someone who wanted to sever his arm. Doing what the other party wanted to do to him was the best punishment for the other party. My arm. Covering his severed arm, Warner-Nahum was in so much pain that he broke out in cold sweat and screamed in pain. You actually crippled his arm. The arm of the most talented member of the Nahum family, his own son, had been chopped off. The head of the Nahum family, Adjana-Nahum, was both shocked and furious. He wanted to go all out against Gray, but he clenched his fists and relaxed them. He knew very well that the current Nahum family was definitely not a match for Gray. Glancing at the other party and seeing that he had no intention of making a move, Gray ignored him and turned to leave with Stanley Grinton. Although he wanted to eliminate the root of the problem and kill all the people who had the deepest enmity with the Nahum family, with the royal family around, such a thing was obviously not allowed, unless he wanted to betray the Purple Moon Kingdom. In the end, he was still not strong enough. If he had the strength of a king warrior now, even if he killed a few people, the royal family would turn a blind eye to it. Although he had great potential now, potential was only potential, not strength. His strength had not reached that level, so naturally, he could not have too many privileges to make the royal family make an exception. After Gray left, only the members of the Naim clan who were all injured and had sullen and angry expressions remained on their faces. Damn it, if Lord Barnet hadn't returned for 10 years, he wouldn't have been so rampant. The green-clothed elder, Adjana-Naim, touched the ground with his sword, supporting his heavily injured body. His eyes were full of unwillingness. As a family that had once produced a king-level powerhouse, the Nahum family did not only have this little strength. In fact, the Nahum family had a third-level desolate-level powerhouse. However, this third-level desolate-level powerhouse had gone out to search for an opportunity to break through and had not returned for 10 years. He hasn't returned for so long. Could Lord Barnet have already? a Nahum family elder said with a worried expression. Barnet Naim was not young anymore. He had gone out to find an opportunity for one last gamble. If he succeeded, he would have a long lifespan of 300 years. If he failed, he would naturally be a skeleton. Now that he had not returned for 10 years, he could not help but worry that Barnet Naim might have died somewhere. No, Lord Barnet will definitely return. The Nahum family's patriarch, Adjanon Naim, said resolutely. Although he also felt that the chances were slim, the Nahum family had just suffered a great calamity. They needed this kind of hope to cheer everyone up. The patriarch is right, Lord Barnet is definitely not dead. Lord Barnet will definitely return. The hesitation in the eyes of many Nahum family members lessened, and hope bloomed in their eyes. It's a little unusually smooth. After walking to a deserted area, Gray put Stanley Grinton into the purple ring. Things had gone so smoothly that it had exceeded his expectations. The large Duke Naim's family had actually been wiped out without much hindrance. This was something he had not expected before coming. He had estimated that the Nahum family should have a third-grade desolation warrior, but in fact, he had not been able to meet one. The strongest was only a second-grade desolation warrior. In front of Stanley Grinton, they had been defeated without any resistance. Only that forbidden weapon had been a little hindrance, but only a little. After Stanley Grinton had withstood it with his powerful defense, he had been easily defeated. And I didn't even see a silver-grade magic weapon. What made Gray feel a little strange was that although the Nahum family had taken out a forbidden weapon, they had not been able to take out a silver-grade magic weapon. According to common sense, the Nahum family should have a silver-grade magic weapon in their hands. Originally, he had wanted to snatch their silver-grade magic weapon, but unfortunately, he had not seen it. Forget it, it's best if there isn't one. So what if there is a third-grade desolation warrior? Gray shook his head and stopped thinking about it. Even if the Nahum family had a third-grade desolation warrior hidden, he had no fear. Stanley Grinton's strength was definitely at the third-grade desolation warrior. In addition to his terrifying defense after metallization, Gray was sure that no third-grade desolation warrior would be a match for him, even if they had a silver-grade magic weapon. Although a silver-grade magic weapon was powerful and could reach the regent level, it consumed a lot of blood force. Even a third-grade desolation warrior would not be able to fight for long with it. Although Stanley Grinton's combat strength was slightly weaker, his powerful defense was enough to make up for the difference. He could rely on his powerful body to exhaust his opponent's blood force. As for the possibility of Stanley Grinton becoming a regent warrior, Gray did not even think about it. In the entire Purple Moon Kingdom, there were less than 10 regent warriors, and most of them were concentrated in the royal family. In the forces outside the royal family, the probability of producing a regent warrior was pitifully low, even for the families of the three dukes. This was evident from the fact that the Addison family and the Nahum family had not produced a regent warrior for more than 200 years. In the past 200 years, did the two families not produce a third-grade desolation warrior? There must have been at least a few of them, but they all failed. There was an invisible gap between third-grade desolation warriors and regent warriors, and it blocked too many third-grade desolation warriors. Chapter 465. Have you heard? In the conflict between the Fergus family and the Nahum family, Grey Fergus was able to escape unscathed, while the Nahum family suffered a great loss. All of them were heavily injured. I heard that they even compensated a total of 10 million gold coins. The various noble and merchant families of the Purple Moon Kingdom had long been paying attention to the conflict between Grey and the Nahum family. When they heard that Grey was able to escape unscathed while the Nahum family was not only injured, but also compensated a total of 10 million gold coins, they couldn't help but be shocked. The Nahum family, one of the three Duke families, had a terrifying foundation. They had once produced a king-level expert, yet they were defeated. This was something they had never expected. Only a few families knew that Gray had the terrifying trump card of Stanley Grinton in his hands. Only then did they expect this. After the 3 dukes, I'm afraid there will be an additional earl. We should call them 3 dukes and 1 earl. Some families sighed. The 3 dukes represented the 3 strongest forces within the Purple Moon Kingdom. The other forces, even the Marquis family, paled in comparison to them. Now, Gray was able to escape unscathed from the conflict with the Nahum family, and even forced the Nahum family to compensate. This already showed that his Earl Fergus family had the power to rival the Duke family. If I had known that the Fergus family had such potential, I would have tried to befriend them. Knowing the conflict between the Fergus family and the Nahum family, many families maintained a wait-and-see attitude when it came to befriending the Fergus family. They didn't want to become enemies, but they didn't want to get close either. Now, they couldn't help but feel some regret. If they had tried their best to befriend the Fergus family back then, they might have already established a close relationship with the Fergus family. It's not too late now. I heard that the Fergus family was suppressed by the Nahum family, and their medicinal herbs are not selling well. This is a good opportunity. Some families' eyes lit up, and they hurriedly sent people to Fergus's territory. At this moment, a pair of siblings who had been staying in Fergus City for a few days were on their way to Fergus Castle in a carriage with carefully selected gifts. In the carriage, Quentin Leander's face was full of astonishment. He actually defeated the Nahum family and even made Leona's family compensate him. A newly promoted earl had actually swept away the Duke's family and even made the Duke's family pay compensation. This was simply inconceivable to him. If the news had not been repeatedly confirmed, he would have thought it was a rumor. His sister, Leander's beautiful face remained calm. Her body exuded a capable aura, but her heart was also full of shock. Back then, he had only rushed to Fergus City because he felt that it was worth a try. However, he did not expect that the other party would actually defeat the Nahum family by himself and make the Nahum family pay compensation. Father, it's already the harvest season for the herbs. Even if we leave them in the field and don't harvest them, there will be a large amount of damage every day. In the study of Fergus Castle, Bernal looked worried. Still haven't contacted a merchant guild that's willing to buy them? Earl Fergus frowned. No. Ever since we were suppressed by Clover Merchant Guild, no other merchant guild is willing to buy our herbs. Obviously, they are afraid of the Nahum family behind Clover Merchant Guild. Bernal smiled bitterly and shook his head. Nahum family? I wonder about Gray's side. Earl Fergus's frown deepened. Deep worry grew in his heart. Father, it'll be fine. Gray is not a reckless person, Bernal said as if he was comforting Count Fergus, but also as if he was comforting himself. Lord Earl, young Master Bernal, the Dawn Merchant Guild is here to visit. At this moment, a servant knocked on the door and reported. Dawn Merchant Guild? Why is the Dawn Merchant Guild here? Earl Fergus and Bernal were both puzzled. They had heard of the Dawn Merchant Guild, but had never come into contact with them. They did not understand why they would come to visit. The two of them came to the living room and saw the siblings, Elle and Quentin Leandre. What? The Dawn Merchant Guild is willing to buy the Fergus family's herbs at market price? After talking for a while, Earl Fergus and Bernal felt as though they had been hit by a pleasant surprise. They did not expect the Dawn Merchant Guild to not only be willing to buy the herbs that the Fergus family could not sell, but also not suppress the price at all. They would buy them at the current market price. Amidst the surreal feeling, the two of them signed the agreement with the Dawn Merchant Guild and sent them away. However, their surprise did not stop there. What? The Purple Cuckoo Merchant Guild is here to visit? Didn't they already reject the Fergus family? What's the meaning of this visit? After that, the two of them were shocked to find that the presidents of the Dawn Merchant Guild, who had rejected them, came to visit them one after another with smiles on their faces. They politely expressed their willingness to buy the Fergus family's herbs. When they found out that the Fergus family had already signed the agreement with the Dawn Merchant Guild, their faces were filled with regret. It was as though the Fergus family's herbs had suddenly become a precious magic potion. Something's not right. What's going on with these Dawn Merchant Guild? Why did their attitudes change so drastically? Earl Fergus and Bernal looked at each other. It was obvious that something had happened that they did not know about. Otherwise, the attitude of these Dawn Merchant Guild would not have changed so drastically. At this moment, a messenger bird flew into Fergus Castle with a letter. After reading the contents of the letter, the two of them finally understood. At the same time, they could not help but be shocked. Grey actually went to the Nahum family and forced the Nahum family to pay 10 million gold coins? What kind of family was the Nahum family? They were a duke family that had produced a king realm fighter and had at least a few Battle of the Wilds in their family. And yet, such a family had been defeated by Grey and forced to pay compensation. How strong did he have to be able to do this? How strong was Grey now? Several months later, in the training grounds of Fergus Castle, two people were fighting in the training ground. One of them was a black-haired young man. He was dressed in a white noble's robe. His black hair flowed in the wind, and his facial features were distinct. He had a pair of blue eyes that were as deep as the sky. The other person was a black-haired girl. Her hair was very long, reaching her waist. It was tied up with a pink hairband. She was dressed in blue female battle attire, revealing her beautiful figure. Her skin was fair, and her eyes were serious and focused. One of them was attacking and the other defending. The black-haired girl wielded a long sword and constantly attacked the black-haired man from various angles. The black-haired man casually flicked and flicked, easily dispersing the black-haired girl's attack. It was clear that his fighting skills were far superior to the black-haired girl's. These two were Grey and Sarah. Rest for a while. Grey glanced at Sarah's sweaty forehead and forced Sarah back with a slash of his sword. The latter immediately stopped when she heard this. Without a care for her image, she propped herself up with her sword and gasped for breath. It was clear that she was truly exhausted. Grey had not left the castle in the past few months. Aside from cultivating, he had been sparring with Sarah to strengthen her fighting skills. The importance of fighting skills in battle went without saying. Although Grey did not intend to let Sarah enter the battlefield, he did not want her to be unable to use her strength. Moreover, Sarah's cultivation talent was not bad, and with sufficient cultivation resources, she had already become a ferocious warrior. She should not waste her strength. Young Master Grey. Barbara stepped forward and gently handed Grey and Sarah a wet towel. Leave this to the servants. Grey took the towel and said, In any case, I have nothing better to do. It's very interesting to watch the two of you fight. Barbara shook her head and smiled. She was also dressed in female battle attire. The most suitable age for a bloodline implant was 15. Although he was already past this age, it did not mean that it could not be implanted. Thus, Grey had purchased blood essence and implanted a bloodline in him. He cultivated the blood art of the Thunder Draconic Beast sequence, but because he was already past the optimal age, his talent was not very good. Even with sufficient resources, his cultivation speed was not very fast. I can take it for the fourth time. In the afternoon, in an open space in the forest, Grey took out a small yellow metal bottle the size of a wine cup. The yellow metal bottle contained a flame-like golden medicinal liquid. A rich medicinal fragrance wafted out from the opening of the bottle. It was not advisable to take medicine that could increase one's strength too frequently. There was a process for the body to absorb the medicine. Taking it too frequently could easily lead to long-term accumulation of the medicine and damage the body. Although Grey felt that his body was extremely special and had an extremely strong ability to absorb medicine and the effective ingredients in the blood of blood fiends, for safety reasons, he did not take it continuously. Instead, he took it once a month. Gulp, after drinking it in one gulp, Gray immediately felt his entire body become extremely limp and numb. It was as if he had been electrocuted. Wave after wave of limp and numb feeling assaulted his mind. In this limp and numb state, he could clearly feel that his body was continuously strengthening. It was this rapid strengthening of his body that caused the limp and numb feeling in his body. After a full half an hour, the limp and numb feeling gradually faded. Although there were still remnants, it was no longer as strong as before. Gray began to practice the blood technique, using it to increase the absorption of the medicine's effective ingredients. A giant beast covered in blue scales appeared in the forest not far from the castle. It had a lizard-like appearance and a huge, blade-like horn. In the forest, all kinds of birds and beasts suddenly trembled. Although it was not a real thunder dragon beast, it more or less carried the aura of a thunder dragon beast. This kind of aura was extremely terrifying to these birds and beasts in the forest, who had not even reached the level of a low-level blood warrior. Because practicing the thunder dragon beast blood technique would cause too much of a commotion, even the training room could not block it. Therefore, Gray chose to practice in the forest around the castle. The training proceeded. The first round of training was completed. The second round of training was completed. The first training method of the third round of training was completed. The second training method of the third round of training was completed. When the second training method of the third round of training was completed, the thunder dragon beast's shadow that enveloped Gray's surroundings began to fester. His physical strength had reached its current limit, and the training was completely over. The second training method of the third round is completely completed. It's time to take the Diamond King Beast's blood. The corners of Gray's mouth curled into a smile. He had been waiting for this day for a few months. Chapter 466. Let's do it here. Taking out the bathtub, Gray used his ice ability to create ice and his fire ability to melt the ice into water of a suitable temperature. Taking off his clothes, Gray stepped into the bathtub. Gray took out a portion of the Diamond King Beast's blood that he had prepared beforehand and drank it in one gulp. Whoosh! The next moment, an extremely itchy feeling spread. It was as if thousands of ants were crawling all over Gray's body. Gray felt itchy all over his body. Knowing that this was a necessary process, Gray did not reach out to grab it. Instead, he tried his best to endure it. According to past experience, the body would react differently after consuming the blood of a desolate level or higher blood beast. When Gray consumed the blood of a desolate level blood beast, Ice Soul Beast, he felt as if his body had fallen into an ice cellar. His entire body became extremely cold. The cold air exuding from his body even turned the water in the bathtub into ice. When he consumed the blood of a thunder dragon, his entire body was covered in purple electric light. The purple electric light formed a lightning cocoon around his body. When he consumed the blood of a desolate level fire-type blood beast, his entire body was covered in purple flames. It was as if his entire body was burning. Now, the effect of consuming the Diamond King Beast's blood was clearly the itching that spread all over his body. Humph! The itching continued and became more intense as time passed. Gray gritted his teeth and endured. His lips had already been bitten by accident. His mouth was filled with the taste of iron, but he did not feel any pain. He just tried his best to endure the itching that was getting more and more intense. Slowly, his skin began to become uneven and full of wrinkles. In the end, cracks began to appear one after another. No blood flowed out from these cracks. Instead, the skin all over his body fell off piece by piece. It was as if the layer of skin that fell off was just a mask applied to his body. The real skin underneath was the layer of skin that had fallen off. When a layer of skin had fallen off, the itching on Gray's body gradually subsided. Only then did the transformation of his body gradually come to an end. He opened his eyes and saw that his skin was so fair that it was comparable to a woman's. The healthy color of his skin that had been exposed to the sun and wind had disappeared without a trace. The bath water was filled with pieces of dead skin, covering the entire bathtub. After changing a basin of water and washing his body, Gray changed into a tight-fitting blue noble suit. His slender figure appeared even more tall and straight under the contrast of his noble attire. Coupled with his long, moist black hair, a unique temperament emanated from his body. I wonder to what extent it can be improved. Clenching his fist, Gray felt an even stronger force in his hand than before, and punched out. Boom! A violent explosion sounded in the air. A tree not far away seemed to have been attacked by an invisible force from his punch. It trembled violently, and a large number of leaves fell. Although the destructive power was extremely weak and far from being able to hurt people from a distance, there was no doubt that the strength of his punch was close to that. When he became stronger, it would not be impossible for him to hurt people from a distance. Air also had mass. As long as he exerted enough force, hurting people from a distance was not a fantasy. Whoosh! Then, he bent his body slightly, like an arrow drawn to its bow. The next moment, he suddenly shot out like an arrow. In an instant, he had left his original position and appeared dozens of meters away. The fast movement brought about a strong gust of wind, causing the surrounding leaves to flutter and spin as they fell. My strength and speed should have reached the first level of the desolated level. According to Gray's judgment, his strength and speed should have reached the first level of the desolated level. It was not the first time that he had fought with someone at the first level of the desolated level. He was very familiar with the strength and speed of this level, so he could easily determine that his current strength and speed had reached this level. I've finally made up for my weakness in strength and speed. Gray nodded his head in satisfaction. A battle was not only a competition of the strength of the blood fiends, but also of speed, strength, defense, combat skills, and many other aspects. When one was relatively weak in a certain aspect, it was easy to be targeted by the opponent and become the cause of defeat. For a long time, speed and strength had been Gray's weakness. It was not the first time that he had been targeted by the opponent. For example, during the Trination exchange, and the last time when he fought with the two desolate blood warriors from the Nahum family, he had been targeted by the opponent. Fortunately, his blood fiends were powerful enough to reach the second level of the desolated level. Moreover, he had the means to attack in a range, so he made up for his weakness in strength and speed and defeated the opponent. However, there was no doubt that his weakness in strength and speed had dragged down his overall combat strength. Without the drag of his strength and speed, he would have become stronger. Now that his strength and speed had reached the first level of the desolated level, his overall combat strength would undoubtedly become stronger, and it would be harder for him to be targeted by the opponent. Next is defense. Gray's eyes flashed with anticipation. The increase in strength and speed naturally made him extremely happy. However, what he looked forward to the most was the increase in defense. Although the increase in strength and speed could increase his overall strength, it was obviously not enough for him to challenge the second level of the desolated level. However, the increase in defense was different. Before he had consumed the Diamond King Beast's blood, he already had a strong defense that was difficult for the first level of the desolated level to damage. Now that he had consumed the Diamond King Beast's blood, his defense would definitely increase greatly. If it could reach the second level of the desolated level, it would be difficult for him to damage the second level of the desolated level. Coupled with the Blood Fiend's ability that was barely at the second level of the desolated level, it would not be impossible for him to have the strength to contend with the second level of the desolated level blood warriors. Of course, everything depended on how much the current strongest defense could be improved. Whoosh! Using the purple ring, Stanley Grinton appeared and controlled its destructive power to be at the first level of the desolated level. Then, it slashed at his metallized body. Clang! The sound of metal colliding rang out. Gray was sent flying backward. He did not know how many trees and rocks he had smashed before he came to a stop. He stood up and looked at the place where Stanley Grinton had slashed at him. Although there was a huge hole in the clothes he had just changed into, there was not a single wound on his excessively white skin. Obviously, his defense had increased again. It was so strong that it was difficult for the first level of the desolated level to damage him. Clang! He had Stanley Grinton control its power to the second level of the desolated level. With another slash, Gray was sent flying again. This time, he was no longer unscathed. A bloody wound appeared where he had been slashed. Dark red blood seeped out, but it was not deep. It was only a minor injury. The second level of the desolated level is difficult to damage. Gray nodded with satisfaction. As expected, even the second level of the desolated level would not be able to damage him with his current defense. With such a defense and the 3 mixed abilities that were barely at the second level of the desolated level, he was confident that he could contend against the second level of the desolated level. The endless ice field referred to the continental area outside of the 4 great kingdoms. It was covered in ice and snow all year round, and the deeper one went, the lower the temperature. It was rumored that in the depths of the endless ice field, there were terrifying blood fiends that surpassed the king level and reached the magic light level. Even one of these blood fiends was enough to destroy any of the 4 great kingdoms. Therefore, the 4 great kingdoms had always been wary of the endless ice field. Fortunately, in the past 1,000 years, although there had been the occasional beast tide in the endless ice plains, and there had even been the appearance of king-level blood fiends, there had never been a magic light-level blood fiend. Otherwise, it would be hard to say whether the 4 great kingdoms would still exist. One day, in the depths of the endless ice field, boom! Suddenly, an aura spread out from the depths of the endless ice field. It was like an invisible dark cloud that covered hundreds of miles in the depths of the endless ice field. It emitted a terrifying aura that was as deep as the abyss. All the creatures fled in panic as if it was the end of the world. Bang! A small mountain of snow collapsed, and a giant beast covered in white fur crawled out from the snow. Its body was more than 10 meters long. Its body was like a bear's, but its head was as round as a tiger's. This was a king-level blood fiend. It was a powerful blood fiend that stood at the top of the food chain. However, at this moment, its eyes were filled with fear. It moved its huge body and fled out of the endless ice field. Poof! A giant blood fiend covered in gray fur suddenly opened its 4 eyes. It was more than 10 meters long and looked like a wolf. However, it had 2 heads and a total of 4 eyes. It was also a king-level blood fiend. However, at this moment, its 4 eyes were filled with fear. With a leap, its strong body was already more than 100 meters away. Because it was too frightened, it did not have time to avoid obstacles. It crashed into a snowy mountain, causing it to collapse. At the same time, in the depths of the endless ice field, one king beast after another was awakened. They all fled out of the endless ice field in fear. As one king beast after another fled out of the endless ice field, a large number of blood fiends ran wildly. A terrifying beast tide that was rarely seen in 100 years was formed. Chapter 467. Frost City, one of the border cities of the Crimson Kingdom near the Ice Plains, was a city with a population of 30,000. On the city walls, the soldiers stretched lazily and leaned against the railings, looking outside the city walls casually. Since the establishment of the kingdom, this city had never been attacked by enemies. Although it was a border city, the soldiers were more or less undisciplined. "What did you do last night? Why do you look so listless?" A beady-eyed soldier looked at his companion and asked curiously. "I went to the shop in the east of the city last night. There were a few girls in the shop." "That skin, that touch," his companion, a big-nosed soldier, chuckled and revealed a meaningful smile. "There are new girls? Why didn't you say so earlier? Let's go together after our shift." The beady-eyed soldier's heart was burning with passion. He could not wait for his shift to start immediately so that he could go to the shop in the east of the city and take care of their business. Dong, dong, dong. All of a sudden, a heavy drumming sound rang out, accompanied by a slight tremor on the ground. What's going on? The beady-eyed soldier and the big-nosed soldier were puzzled as they looked outside the city walls. They saw an extremely wide dark cloud rapidly approaching from the distant horizon. Upon closer inspection, they realized that it was not a dark cloud but a herd of wild beasts and blood fiends. There were so many of them that one couldn't see the end of them. Among them, one could clearly see huge blood fiends. Beast tide, it's a beast tide, quickly closed the city gates. The two of them broke out in cold sweat and shouted in horror. Clang, clang, clang. The city gates were closed, and the alarm rang. The urgent sound of the bell spread throughout the city. What's going on? Why is the ground shaking? The residents of the city walked out of their houses with puzzled expressions. Then, an apocalyptic scene appeared before them. The tall city walls collapsed, and a large number of wild beasts and mixed blood fiends rushed into the city. Among them, there was no lack of terrifying blood fiends that were several meters tall. They ran amok, knocking down houses and trampling over people. There were screams everywhere, and blood and flesh splattered everywhere. In a short while, the city had become a ghost town. The entire city was flattened, and the ground was covered in blood and flesh. Some belonged to the wild beasts, and some belonged to the residents of the city. At the same time, the same thing was happening in the other cities at the border of the Crimson Kingdom. The terrifying beast tide continued to push forward. Everywhere it passed, there was no life left. It was a stretch of ruins. It was only when the Crimson Kingdom's royal family received the news and sent out king-level experts that the beast tide was finally stopped. However, the number of people who died in this beast tide had already reached millions. For the Scarlet Kingdom, today was destined to be a disaster that would be recorded in history. The news of the Crimson Kingdom encountering a monster horde that was hard to come by in hundreds of years quickly spread throughout the entire Crimson Kingdom, spreading to the Gem Kingdom, Purple Moon Kingdom, and the Flame Kingdom. Everyone who received the news couldn't help but be shocked and astonished. They were astonished by the scale of the beast tide and the number of casualties. A rare beast tide happened in the Crimson Kingdom, and millions of people died? After receiving the news, Gray was silent for a long time. There was no schadenfreude on his face, only shock. During the Three Kingdoms exchange, he didn't get along well with the Crimson Kingdom. Not only was he targeted by the nobles of the Crimson Kingdom, but in the end, because he was suspected of cultivating a hybrid blood technique, the king-level expert of the Crimson Kingdom had attacked him. Even so, when Gray heard the news, his first reaction was not joy, but extreme depression. Millions of people had died just like that. How tragic was this? The corpses were enough to pile up into several mountains, and the blood was enough to gather into a lake. Millions of people, millions of once fresh lives disappeared just like that. Among them, there must be young girls in the most brilliant age of their lives. There were bound to be ignorant children who were curious about the future. There must be men and women who were in love. However, with a beast tide, everything dissipated. This was a disaster that would be recorded in history. A beast tide can't happen for no reason. There must be some unforeseen event in the depths of the ice plains that caused the beast tide to happen. What kind of unforeseen event is it? Gray held his chin with one hand, and his eyes showed that he was thinking. More than 100 years ago, the Purple Moon Kingdom also encountered a beast tide from the endless ice plains. However, that beast tide was far less intense than the one in the Crimson Kingdom, and only about 100,000 people died in that beast tide. The Purple Moon Kingdom sent experts to investigate the cause of the beast tide and found that it was the appearance of a ruin from the Empire era. The beast tide was caused by the appearance of the ruin. It was said that after the Purple Moon Kingdom explored this ruin, their harvest was extremely great. There was more than one silver-level magic weapon, and there were also many magic potions that still had their medicinal effect. More than 300 years ago, The Jewel Kingdom also encountered a beast tide from the endless ice plains, and hundreds of thousands of people died. After investigation, it was found that the beast tide was caused by the appearance of a magic light level powerhouse's tomb during the Empire era. In the magic light level powerhouse's tomb, the Jewel Kingdom obtained 3 bottles of extremely precious magic potions. It was said that each bottle of magic potion was enough to create a king-level powerhouse. Is it the Empire era's ruin or the tomb of a king? With such a huge commotion this time, I'm afraid the scale must be unprecedentedly strong. Gray was tempted to explore the endless ice plains. To cause such a terrifying beast tide, the commotion in the depths of the endless ice plains must be extremely huge. The bigger the commotion, the greater the harvest after exploration. He could not help but have the urge to explore. His current strength was not weak. His terrifyingly strengthened physical body gave him the ability to fight against a level 2 desolation level. In addition, he could barely reach the level 2 desolation level with his blood fiends. Even if he encountered a level 2 desolation level existence, the victor would only be determined after a battle. If he counted Stanley Grinton, his combat strength could reach level 3 desolation level. With such a powerful combat strength, he was qualified to explore. At this moment, a giant bird with green fur and a wingspan of 1 meter appeared in the sky above Fergus Castle. It circled above Fergus Castle. When it discovered Gray, it quickly lowered its altitude. Finally, it retracted its wings and landed on the ground, standing not far away from Gray. This was the murderous level blood fiend Wind Eagle. However, it had been cultivated by the Purple Moon Kingdom's royal family as a messenger bird. It was responsible for delivering letters from the Purple Moon Kingdom's royal family. Gray looked at the Wind Eagle's feet. Indeed, there was a ribbon tied around one of its feet. When he untied the ribbon, he saw an envelope with the Purple Moon Kingdom's royal family's emblem. After opening the envelope and skimming through its contents, Gray's lips curled into a smile. There were only a few lines in the letter. The content was an invitation to follow the royal family to explore the endless ice plains. It was not mandatory but an invitation. If Gray was willing, he would have to gather at a city near the endless ice plains in the Scarlet Kingdom within a week. If he was unwilling, there was no need to force him. After writing a reply, Gray tied it to the Wind Eagle's feet and released it. He would definitely accept the invitation. He already had plans to explore the endless ice plains. Now that he was invited by the royal family to explore, he was naturally very happy. Although he was not weak, following the royal family would undoubtedly guarantee his safety. I have to reach the Scarlet Kingdom's border near the endless ice plains in a week. It's a bit of a rush, so I have to set off as soon as possible. After greeting the Fergus family, Gray set off for the Scarlet Kingdom on the same day. He did not take a carriage. It was impossible to reach the endless ice plains in a week if he took an ordinary carriage. He temporarily removed Stanley Grinton's control and changed it to a 7-meter-long bear-shaped blood fiend covered in yellow fur. This was a desolate-level blood fiend, a wild bear. Gray had exchanged merits for it on the battlefield with the Flame Kingdom. It had the ability to manipulate gravity when it was alive, but it was naturally gone now. Although its combat strength was not as good as Stanley Grinton's, it was undoubtedly very suitable as a means of transportation. Thump, thump, thump. Along the trade route, the 7-meter-long wild bear, weighing several tons, hurried along on all fours. Along the way, it encountered many caravans, causing a commotion. They thought it was a high-level blood fiend attack, especially during this special period when the Scarlet Kingdom was being attacked by a beast tide. Almost everyone was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow and easily caused panic. It was only when they saw Gray sitting on the giant bear that the panic stopped. What was left was uncontrollable amazement and curiosity, guessing Gray's identity. Gray was not the only one causing panic. The Purple Moon Kingdom's royal family, the Kenneth family, the Addison family, and the Nahum family also had people hurrying along. Obviously, they wanted to reach the endless ice plains as soon as possible to seize the opportunity. The blood of the next blood fiend must be from the wind falcon. Sitting on the wild bear, Gray was slightly regretful. He did not possess the bloodline of a bird-type blood fiend and could not use the power of blood to simulate the flight of wings. Although the flying ability of a bird-type blood fiend might not necessarily be faster than that of a land animal, it was very suitable for hurrying along. After all, flying in the sky was a straight line, while running on the ground would encounter various obstacles and take many detours. Generally speaking, the speed of a bird-type blood fiend was not slow among those of the same realm. Moreover, with Gray's current ability to control corpses, after controlling Stanley Grinton, he could not control anything else. In order to control this wild bear, he removed his control over Stanley Grinton. This would inevitably cause his strength to not be at its peak. If he encountered an enemy while hurrying along, it would undoubtedly be a very bad situation. Although the speed of the wild bear could not be compared to that of a bird-type blood fiend of the same realm, it only took him 2 days to enter the territory of the Scarlet Kingdom. He rushed toward the border of the Scarlet Kingdom near the ice plains. In 3 days, he had entered the Scarlet Kingdom's border area, which was the most affected area of the Beast Tide. Chapter 468. Entering the disaster area, Gray saw an extremely wide area where no living people could be seen. There were dead cities one after another, ruins after ruins, piles of bones, and a strong stench. During the day, all kinds of scavengers shuttled back and forth, treating this place as their paradise. At night, ghosts wandered in the dead cities, letting out horrifying screams. There was not a single living person in sight. This was a forbidden area for humans. The remaining journey was not far. Gray put away the wild bear and controlled Stanley Grinton again, hurrying on foot. Screech, a shrill scream came from the sky. Gray looked up and saw a giant bird with a wingspan of 7 or 8 meters, covered in flame-like feathers, flying across the sky. This was a blood fiend that came with the Beast Tide but did not return to the icefield in the end. The other party seemed to have noticed Gray and turned back. It quickly lowered its altitude and stretched out its sharp claws, which were as sharp as magical weapons, to grab Gray. This was the Flamingo, a barbaric level blood fiend with the ability to control fire. Gray did not dodge. Near him, a large amount of black metal powder floated up and turned into sharp blades one after another. Lightning flashed on the sharp blades, like tens of thousands of arrows being shot at the same time, attacking the Flamingo. Screech! Flamingo let out a mournful shriek. Its body quickly dodged and spat out a long tongue of flame, burning the lightning blade that was coming towards it. Some of the lightning blades were melted into liquid metal, but compared to the huge number of lightning blades, it was insignificant. Puff, puff, puff. One after another, the lightning blades pierced through the Flamingo's body. There was no blood spilling out, only charred wounds. Finally, the Flamingo's body was charred black, and it fell straight to the ground. After passing the Flamingo, Gray continued to move forward. This was the 13th blood fiend he had encountered. Although the king-level powerhouses of the Scarlet King had repelled the Beast Tide and even driven it back to the endless icefield, there were still many blood fiends lingering on this land. This land was now very dangerous. If one did not have the strength of a desolate-level powerhouse, it was almost impossible to move forward. In the evening, Gray pitched a tent on a wasteland and lit a bonfire. There were still 2 days before the rendezvous. Gray was not in a hurry to meet up with them, so he slowed down and did not rush at night. A beast leg that weighed more than 50 kilograms was skinned, washed, and roasted over the bonfire. Golden oil dripped down, and a rich aroma wafted out. This was the right foreleg of an unnamed blood fiend he had killed along the way. As his strength increased, his appetite also increased. Although the situation of the other blood warriors was similar to him, the increase in his appetite was obviously more terrifying. Now, he was eating blood fiend's flesh for almost every meal. This wasn't because his strength had increased or because he wanted to improve his quality of life, but because he was forced to. As his strength increased, the amount of meat he ate for each meal also increased. In the end, he had to eat dozens of kilograms of livestock meat for one meal. Eating dozens of kilograms of meat for one meal was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that it was extremely time-consuming. He had to spend a lot of time eating every day. Therefore, he had been eating the flesh of blood fiends for every meal. Moreover, it was usually the flesh of barbarian or desolate-level blood fiends. Only the flesh of barbarian or desolate-level blood fiends, which had extremely nourishing properties, could satisfy his daily consumption without consuming too much of it. Sitting next to the bonfire, Gray cut a large piece of meat and ate heartily. Crack! In the forest not far away, the sound of trees shaking violently could be heard. It was even accompanied by the sound of trees collapsing. Obviously, a big guy was coming this way. Before Gray could move, Stanley Grinton, who had been ordered by Gray to be on guard, had already dashed into the forest. Pop! The sound of flesh being cut rang out. The forest regained its tranquility. Many trees had collapsed due to the commotion caused by the fight just now. Stanley Grinton returned with his broken saber back in its sheath. He once again stood not far away from the tent, loyally guarding Gray's safety. Gray did not intend to see what kind of blood fiend it was and continued eating. Crack! However, not long after, a huge commotion could be heard not far away from the previous location. Swish! Stanley Grinton dashed out again and scuttled into the forest. In an instant, the commotion in the forest disappeared again. Stanley Grinton had returned once more. I actually encountered 2 blood fiends in such a short period of time. Could they have been attracted by the smell of roasted meat? Gray had some doubts in his heart. He planned to check out what kind of blood fiends had attacked him after finishing his meal. Crack! Just as he was thinking about this, the sound of trees collapsing could be heard from the forest again. Pop, pop! Stanley Grinton dashed into the forest with his saber. This time, he was unable to finish off his opponent immediately. After exchanging blows for a short while, he finally finished off his opponent completely. Something's not right. Gray swallowed the remaining roasted meat in one gulp and stood up. The blood fiends attacking tonight were not normal. According to common sense, it should not be so frequent. He walked to the last location where he had heard the commotion and saw the blood fiend that Stanley Grinton had spent a lot of effort to kill. It was a huge blood fiend with golden skin. On its head, there were 2 curved blade-like horns, one long and the other short. It's actually a golden rhinoceros. No wonder Stanley Grinton had to spend a lot of effort to kill it. Gray's face showed a hint of understanding. The golden rhinoceros was a desolate-level blood fiend. Moreover, among desolate-level blood fiends, it was known for its defense. Its physical defense was enough to make it difficult for a level 1 desolate-level powerhouse to injure it. With such a strong physical body, it was no wonder that Stanley Grinton had to spend a lot of effort to kill it. Green looked at the wounds on the golden rhinoceros. There were several deep wounds on the golden rhinoceros body. Each wound was so deep that the bones could be seen. Stanley Grinton's destructive power as a level 3 desolate-level powerhouse was unmistakable. The most serious wound had almost split the rhinoceros head in half. This wound should be the reason why the golden rhinoceros was completely killed. It's barely bleeding? Gray looked around the golden rhinoceros with a puzzled expression. With such a huge wound, the golden rhinoceros should have lost a lot of blood. However, on the contrary, there was almost no blood flowing from the golden rhinoceros body. Could it be? Gray narrowed his eyes and thought of a possibility. Crack, crack! At this moment, the sound of trees being brutally broken was heard. From 2 different directions, 2 more blood fiends rushed over. Soon, the figures of the 2 blood fiends appeared. With the help of the moonlight, Gray saw that one of the blood fiends was 6 meters long. Its body was covered with golden red fur, and it looked like a huge lion. This was a desolate level blood fiend, the blazing lion. It was a type of blood fiend that could cover its entire body. It could be used as both an offensive and defensive weapon. The other blood fiend looked like a lizard. If its tail was included, it was 9 meters long. Its surface was covered with green scales that looked like they were polished from jade. This was a desolate level blood fiend, the Jade Dragon. Gray's reverse nurturing ability was obtained from this type of blood fiend. As expected, seeing the two blood fiends, Gray murmured. His eyes were burning with passion. He had night vision. The reason why he had to use the moonlight to see the two blood fiends clearly was that the temperature of the two blood fiends was almost the same as the temperature of the surrounding environment. In other words, these two blood fiends were already corpses. Could it be that the one controlling them is an Umbra ape? Gray's eyes were filled with anticipation. The Umbra ape was a desolate level blood fiend with the cadaveric hair ape bloodline. Just like Gray's cadaveric hair ape bloodline, the Umbra ape bloodline also had the ability to control corpses. What's more, the level and number of corpses it could control were higher. So far, Gray had encountered 3 desolate level blood fiends. If the first 2 were also desolate level blood fiends, then the one controlling the corpses must be a desolate level blood fiend, the Umbra ape. Needless to say, its ability to control corpses was powerful. Stanley Grinton, who was currently pouncing on one of the desolate level blood fiends, was the best proof. Although the cadaveric hair ape bloodline was only a berserk level bloodline, after Gray obtained the corpse of a king-level warrior, he was able to unleash a terrifying level 3 desolate level combat strength. If the one controlling these blood fiends was a desolate level blood fiend, Gray could kill it and obtain its blood. The number of king-level corpses he could control would increase to 4 if he could obtain its blood. 4 king-level corpses, even if they were not corpses of the physical type, would be enough for Gray to defeat anyone at the desolate level. He could even put up a fight against a king-level fighter. Of course, the most likely outcome would be defeat. Under Gray's command, Stanley Grinton swung his saber at the Jade Dragon's head. With one slash, the Jade Dragon's brain juice spurted out and it became completely stiff. On the other side, Gray attacked the flaming lion. A long river of black fog appeared, and large patches of trees disappeared. The flaming lion was also enveloped in the fog. The flaming lion's fur quickly disappeared, and it struggled violently in the black fog. Unfortunately, after losing its blood fiend ability, its combat strength was not even comparable to that of an ordinary desolate level blood fiend. Naturally, it could not break free from Gray's black fog, which had reached level 2 desolate level power. Under the black fog, the flaming lion's flesh and blood melted away. Eventually, its skull was exposed, and its body completely lost its ability to move. With Stanley Grinton in tow, Gray headed in the direction of the 2 desolate level blood fiends. After walking for a few hundred meters, he suddenly heard a huge commotion in front of him. It was as if thousands of soldiers and horses were rushing toward him. He stopped in his tracks and looked forward. Immediately, he saw hundreds of blood fiends rushing over in a grandiose manner. There were desolate-level blood fiends, barbaric-level blood fiends, and even maniacal-level blood fiends. Among these blood fiends, there was an 8-meter-long ape-type blood fiend covered in white fur. It was like a bonfire in the night, and Gray could see it clearly. This was because only this blood fiend's temperature was different from the surrounding environment. It was truly alive. Judging from its size and the number of blood fiends it controlled, it was definitely a desolate-level blood fiend, a flaming ape. Chapter 469. Under the purple moonlight, hundreds of blood fiends rushed over. The ground shook violently, and the birds and beasts that were resting on the trees flew away in fright. It was as if a beast tide was happening. Although their numbers were not comparable to a real beast tide, their strength made up for the lack of numbers. Hundreds of blood fiends were at least murderous level, and their momentum was not inferior to a normal beast tide. "This is ridiculous." Looking at such a beast tide, Gray was surprised. Although he knew that the Gloom Ape could control a large number of blood fiends, he did not expect it to be to this extent. The beast tide caused by the abnormal movement in the depths of the endless ice field had helped the Gloom Ape achieve its goal. The blood fiends that died in the beast tide were probably under its control. As the beast tide approached, Gray and Stanley Grinton both took action. Puff, puff, puff. Stanley Grinton rushed into the beast tide and unsheathed his broken sword. Every time he slashed, a blood fiend would be cut in half. Chee chee chee. On the other hand, Gray's Black Fog River, which was dozens of meters wide, surged out and collided with the beast tide. Immediately, a large number of blood fiends were swept into the Black Fog River and frantically struggled within. The flesh and blood of these blood fiends were disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, all that was left were withered skeletons that had been corroded beyond recognition. Some of the weaker ones didn't even have skeletons left. They had been completely turned into ashes. However, there were too many blood fiends. Even with the Black Fog River, it was difficult to stop all the blood fiends. Swoosh! A 5-meter-long tiger-shaped blood fiend appeared beside Gray. Its body was covered in black and white veins, and its sharp claws were aimed at Gray's throat. Puff! Still maintaining control of the Black Fog River, Gray unsheathed his sword and pierced the eye of the tiger-shaped blood fiend. His strength had reached level 1 of the Desolation level, so the power of his sword was not inferior to that of a level 2 barbarian-level blood fiend. Encountering a slight obstruction, the sword pierced through the eye of the tiger-shaped blood fiend and through its brain. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Just as the tiger-shaped blood fiend fell, another 3 blood fiends that were about the same size as the tiger-shaped blood fiend pounced on Gray. One of them was an unknown blood fiend that was covered in gray fur and looked like a goat or a cow. One was a wolf-type blood fiend. One was a blood fiend with spikes all over its body. Gray swung his sword to the left and slashed across the neck of the gray-haired blood fiend, sending its head flying. Then, he pierced through the mouth of the wolf-type blood fiend and penetrated its skull. At this moment, the blood fiend with spikes all over its body had already arrived in front of Gray. Its spiked body ruthlessly slammed into Gray. Holes appeared on Gray's clothes one after another, and he was knocked back more than 10 steps. However, after metallization, his strong defense was enough to make a second desolate-level blood warrior unable to do anything to him, so he did not suffer any injuries. He rushed to the side of the blood fiend that was covered in spikes. With a sweep of his longsword, he instantly sliced off a large piece of its skull. White brain matter flowed out, and the blood fiend that was covered in spikes collapsed with a plop. Swish, swish, swish. More and more blood fiends rushed over, attacking Gray from all directions. All of a sudden, a black mist surged out from Gray's surroundings like a tidal wave. All of the blood fiends were slapped away by the black mist, and large chunks of flesh and blood on their bodies disappeared. Clang, clang. Under the attacks of Gray and Stanley Grinton, the blood fiends fell one after another. Soon, more than 100 blood fiends had fallen. Especially under Stanley Grinton's attacks, almost none of the blood fiends could withstand more than 2 strikes from him. The speed at which he killed the blood fiends was even faster than Gray, who had an area of effect attack like the black mist. However, the Umbra Ape was also very cunning. Gray ordered Stanley Grinton to attack the Umbra Ape several times, but it was blocked by the Umbra Ape's blood fiends. The Umbra Ape hid under the heavy protection of the blood fiends and used them as its shields, preventing Gray and Stanley Grinton from getting close to it. Let's see how long you can hide. After a few failed attacks, Gray decided to give up on attacking the Umbra Ape directly. Whether it was him or Stanley Grinton, they both had terrifying defenses that the blood fiends could not harm. They were already in an invincible position. If the battle continued, the number of blood fiends would decrease, and the Umbra ape would have nowhere to hide. Plop, plop. Another 100 blood fiends fell. There were less than 100 blood fiends guarding the Umbra ape. The Umbra ape seemed to have sensed the danger, and its eyes flickered. Squeak, squeak. The Umbra ape let out a sharp squeak. Then, all the blood fiends went berserk. They no longer dodged the attacks. Instead, they surrounded Gray and Stanley Grinton, while the Umbra ape fled in the direction it came from. Do you think you can escape? The black fog tumbled and a large amount of black fog appeared. However, the front part of the black fog was divided into two, like a forked river. A vacuum was formed in the middle, trapping the hundreds of blood fiends in the middle. Stanley Grinton avoided the black fog and chased after the Umbra ape while Gray did so. Chee chee chee. One after another, the blood fiends crashed into the black fog. Their bodies quickly melted in the black fog, but they continued to advance. Even with the might of the black fog, it was dispersed by the blood fiends. Gray was immediately surrounded by a large number of blood fiends. The black fog wrapped around the longsword, making it a few meters long. Gray swung his sword rapidly while surrounded by the blood fiends. Poof, poof. One blood fiend after another was cleaved in half by his swings. All kinds of internal organs fell to the ground, and white brain tissue scattered everywhere. With his stage 1 desolate level strength and his barely stage 2 desolate level blood fiends, other than the desolate level blood fiends, none of the other blood fiends could withstand his sword. One by one, the blood fiends were cleaved in half. Since they were controlled corpses, they did not stop even after their bodies were cleaved in half. However, it was obvious that their struggles were futile. Facing the encirclement of close to 100 blood fiends, Gray was not completely unharmed. From time to time, he would be sent flying by the blood fiends' attack. His clothes were tattered, but he was not injured. His strong defense was not something that these blood fiends, who were only stage 1 desolate level at most, could hurt. Thump, thump, thump. Suddenly, all the blood fiends seemed to have been attacked by a soul attack. Their souls shattered and disappeared, and they all fell to the ground, no longer breathing. Seeing this scene, Gray was not surprised. He stood in place and waited. If he was not mistaken, Stanley Grinton had killed the Phantom Ape. As expected, Stanley Grinton returned after a while. He was carrying the Phantom Ape's body, which was much larger than his body, with one hand as if he was carrying a huge rock. Gray hurriedly went forward to collect the blood. After collecting all the blood, he thought for a while and kept the Phantom Ape's corpse as well. Although the method of refining corpse-controlling demonic weapons had disappeared with the fall of the Empire, if this method was discovered again one day, the corpse of the Phantom Ape would be of great use. Together with its blood, it could be used to refine corpse-controlling demonic weapons. The next morning, Gray set off. After encountering many blood fiends, Gray rushed to the rendezvous point and met up with the royal family of the Purple Moon Kingdom. Not only the royal family of the Purple Moon Kingdom, but also the Kenneth family, the Addison family, and the Nahum family were there. Apart from them, there were also people from the Scarlet Kingdom and the Jewel Kingdom. Gray saw some familiar faces among them, such as the Scarlet Prince, Lars Scarlet, and the Jewel Queen, Glynwy Austin. Why don't I see any king-level experts? Gray asked curiously. With such a huge incident occurring in the depths of the endless ice field, it was reasonable to say that king-level experts would have rushed over. However, there were no king-level experts from the three kingdoms. They have already set off to investigate the depths of the endless ice field. Sophia, who was dressed in blue battle armor and had a slim figure, said as she brushed her purple hair behind her ear. What happened in the depths of the endless ice field? Did you hear anything from the Scarlet Kingdom? No. Although the Scarlet Kingdom is close to the Scarlet Kingdom, they probably don't know much more about the incident than we do. Francis, who was dressed in bronze battle armor and had an outstanding temperament, shook his head. There were king-level blood fiends in the Beast Tide this time, and there was more than one. The Scarlet Kingdom spent a lot of effort to repel the beast tide. When we arrived, the Scarlet Kingdom had just cleared the beast tide and had not had time to investigate. There were king-level blood fiends, and there was more than one. Gray was shocked. Although he knew that the Scarlet Kingdom had encountered a beast tide and millions of people had died, he did not know the exact scale of the beast tide. He did not expect that there would be more than one king-level blood fiend in the beast tide. It was no wonder that there were so many casualties. What about those king-level blood fiends? Will we encounter them when we explore the endless ice field? Gray was a little worried. Although he was not weak now, it would still be difficult for him to face a king-level blood fiend. No, all the king-level blood fiends have been killed by the Scarlet Kingdom. Sophia shook her head. But this time, we have to be careful of the Flame Kingdom. The Flame Kingdom? The Flame Kingdom has also arrived at the endless ice field? How did they get past the blockade of our three kingdoms? Gray's heart skipped a beat. The Flame Kingdom was a landlocked country, located in the middle of the Purple Moon, Scarlet, and Gem Kingdoms. It was not connected to the endless ice field. Logically speaking, it was impossible for the other party to avoid the territories of the three kingdoms and arrive at the endless ice field. With such a big change in the endless ice field, the Flame Kingdom will definitely come to investigate. Although it is impossible for them to send a large number of people to get past the blockade of our three kingdoms, it is possible for them to send a small number of people to sneak in secretly. Francis explained. But don't worry too much. After all, this is the home ground of our three kingdoms. Even if the Flame Kingdom sent people to sneak in, they will be at a disadvantage in terms of numbers compared to our three kingdoms. Of course, don't trust the Jewel Kingdom and the Scarlet Kingdom too much. If you find something good, you have to be careful of the two kingdoms. Chapter 470. The next day, the three kingdoms set off one after another. They did not move together. Not only the three kingdoms, but even their own kingdoms did the same. Within the Purple Moon Kingdom, the Kenneth family, the Addison family, and the Nahum family set off on their own. The royal family's team also set off separately. This time, they were going to investigate the reason for the strange movement deep in the endless ice field. Under the circumstances of ensuring their safety, it was naturally better to spread out as far as possible. Gray followed the royal family. In their group, other than him, there was Sophia and the three elders of the royal family. There were a total of 5 people. Walking in the endless ice field, there was not thick snow under their feet, but mud and weeds. The endless ice field was not filled with icebergs. In the outer regions, there were also green plants that were not covered by ice. However, as they approached the depths of the endless ice field, the temperature would become lower and lower. In the end, the surroundings would become a world of ice and snow, a vast expanse of white. Along the way, Gray and the rest were very careful. However, they still could not avoid encountering blood fiends, and many of them were quite powerful. In the endless ice field, blood fiends were already very dense. In addition to the beast tide, the distribution of blood fiends in the endless ice field was very messy. Even in the outer regions, it was possible to encounter a desolate-level blood fiend. Hiss, a giant snake with 4 heads discovered Gray and the rest. Its 4 heads spat out snake pistols, and the snake's eyes with vertical pupils stared coldly at Gray and the rest. After a moment of confrontation, the 4-headed snake launched an attack. Whoosh! A black head suddenly spat out a large amount of black fog. The surrounding plants quickly melted under the black fog. This was a poison attribute ability. Whoosh! A water-colored head spat out a water column. The water column carried high pressure and pierced downwards like a sharp sword. Crackle! A blue head spat out a winding lightning bolt that was as thick as a water bucket. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! Metal spikes appeared around a golden head and rained down like raindrop. 4-headed snake was a blood beast with 4 heads and 4 different blood beast abilities. It was rumored that the bloodline of this blood beast originated from the legendary 10-headed mythical beast, Hydra. However, There was naturally a huge difference between the four-headed snake bloodline and the legendary 10-headed divine beast Hydra. Although it had 4 heads, the power of the blood beast ability that each head controlled was very mediocre. Voila! Gray made his move. Black fog rolled out like a river. It was several meters tall and dozens of meters wide. It had the destructive power of Desolation Grade Level 2 and easily blocked all of the four-headed snake's attacks. Not only that, but the long river of black fog also pushed forward, drowning the four-headed snake in the black fog. The four-headed snake struggled madly in the black fog. Using the abilities of the 4 blood fiends, it finally broke free from the black fog river. However, its entire body was dripping with blood, and large chunks of flesh had disappeared. Whoosh! Gray approached the four-headed serpent with his great sword shrouded in black mist. The four-headed serpent sensed him and swung its 4 heads, baring its sharp venomous fangs to attack Gray. Puff! The black greatsword in Gray's hand swept out, and one of the black heads was chopped off. Then, he quickly dodged, and in the next moment, 3 heads smashed into the place where he was just standing, and the ground splashed with rocks and dirt. Puff! In the midst of the splattering, Gray approached and swung his black greatsword. Another head fell off. Although he was still at the 2nd level of the Barbarian grade, Gray's speed had reached the 1st level of the Desolation grade because he had consumed the Diamond King Beast's blood. Puff, puff! In the end, the other 2 heads of the four-headed snake were also cut off by Gray. The four-headed snake's huge body fell to the ground with a plop. Large amounts of blood flowed out from the severed heads. Gray quickly took out his rune bag to collect the blood. After collecting the blood, he also put away the snake's corpse. The blood and flesh of a Desolation-grade blood beast were extremely valuable, and the purple ring's space was extremely large. He was not worried that it would be full. Its destructive power has indeed reached the 2nd level of the Desolation grade. Its speed and strength have also reached the 1st level of the Desolation grade. Seeing Gray kill the four-headed snake so easily, Sophia was not surprised, but the 3 elders of the kingdom were slightly surprised. They had heard of Gray's strength, but they were skeptical. After all, it was too exaggerated for a 20-year-old to have the destructive power of a Desolation-grade blood beast. Now, it seemed that not only was it not exaggerated, but they had also underestimated him. The 5 of them continued their journey into the depths of the endless ice field. Along the way, they encountered many blood beasts. All 5 of them fought, and even Sophia killed a Desolation-grade blood beast. It was obvious that her combat power was not weaker than an ordinary Desolation-grade blood beast. Moreover, with her terrifying speed, if she wanted to escape, even a Desolation-grade blood beast would not be able to stop her. The temperature has obviously dropped. Gray exhaled, but it was immediately turned into a cloud of mist by the cold air outside. The air temperature had obviously dropped, and the plants they saw were all cold-resistant. Roar, woo-woo! Suddenly, the loud roar of a blood beast entered their ears, accompanied by a loud clanging sound. The 5 of them immediately became alert and listened carefully. There are 2 types of blood beasts. There should be 2 blood beasts fighting, Sophia deduced. With such a big commotion, the 2 blood beasts fighting should be of high levels. They should both be Desolation-grade blood beasts. Gray added, "Let's go and see what's going on," one of the elders of the Purple Moon Kingdom suggested. This time, they were investigating the cause of the strange movements in the endless ice field. Since there were Desolation-grade blood beasts fighting, they naturally had to go and investigate. In order not to alarm the 2 blood beasts, the 5 of them tried their best to approach as quietly as possible. They hid behind a rock and saw the 2 blood beasts fighting. One of the blood beasts was 10 meters long. Its body was as heavy as a mountain, and its 4 claws were extremely huge, like the claws of an excavator. Its body was covered with bronze scales, and there were sharp spikes on its back. Copperback dragon. Gray recognized the type of blood beast. It was a Desolation-grade blood beast, the copperback dragon. The Sydney family had once owned this type of blood beast, but it had died at the hands of the king of assassins. Its metallization ability also came from this type of blood beast. The copperback dragon, known for its defense, is actually in such a miserable state. With the copperback dragon's defense, it should have been able to protect itself even if it was not a match for other desolation-grade blood beasts. However, the copperback dragon was currently in a miserable state. Many of the spikes on its back were broken, and many of the scales on its body had fallen off. There were even large chunks of flesh that had been torn off from its body, and bronze blood was constantly flowing out. To be able to injure the copperback dragon so severely, one could only imagine the strength of the blood beast that was fighting it. Gray could not help but look at the blood beast that was fighting it. It was a blood beast that was about 9 meters long. It stood on its hind legs and looked like an ape. However, on its forehead there was a sharp horn. Furthermore, it only had a single eye, and it just so happened to be located below the sharp horn. Its appearance was exactly the same as the description of the king beast that Gray had seen in the book Physical Ability. This was definitely a king beast. A king beast. This voice did not come from Gray, but from Sophia, who was beside Gray. Although Gray had obtained a precious book from the Empire and knew about the existence of this kind of blood fiend, the royal family's background was not bad either. They had also obtained similar books from other places, and Sophia also knew about the existence of this kind of blood fiend. That's not right. A king beast's body is usually more than 10 meters long. This blood beast is only 9 meters long. Although it is indeed a king beast, it is not an adult yet. An elder of the Purple Moon Kingdom judged. Although it is not an adult yet, it should not be far away. This king beast's combat power is not inferior to that of a desolate level 3rd stage. Another elder of the Purple Moon Kingdom said. This was an old man with thinning hair. His name was Mubus Violet. Gray had seen him kill a desolate level blood beast with a single strike. If he was not mistaken, he should be a desolate level 3rd stage blood beast. It's a pity that I am the only desolate level 3rd stage blood beast here. Otherwise, I could try to hunt it down. Hunt it down? Grandpa Mubus, you want to use the king beast to refine a magical weapon? Sophia asked. She knew that Mubus Violet was a weapon refiner, so she immediately thought that Mubus Violet wanted to use the king beast to refine a magical weapon. Yes. In an ancient book from the Empire, I found a method to refine a magical armor. However, this magical armor requires the scales and blood of the king beast. Mubus Violet said. Gray, this king beast is very useful to the royal family. I will have to trouble you and Grandpa Mubus to work together. Sophia nodded and looked at Gray. No problem. You can have the blood and scales, but the corpse will be mine. Gray agreed. He owed the royal family of the Purple Moon Kingdom a lot of favors. Since Sophia asked for it, he naturally did not mind helping. Moreover, he was also interested in the corpse of the king beast. To a certain extent, this king beast's body was not inferior to a king-level expert. On the other hand, the old man surprised Yi Futian. He was a craftsman and most likely a master craftsman of a high level. After all, the armor that the old man wanted to craft required the scales and blood of the King Kong beast, so it had to be of a high level. The 3 elders of the Purple Moon Kingdom looked at Gray and Sophia strangely. From the conversation between the two, they judged that Gray seemed to be at the 3rd stage of the desolation level. Otherwise, Sophia would not have asked Gray and Mubus Violet to work together. Roar. Just as Gray and the other 4 were whispering to each other, the battle on the other side was nearing its end. The king beast stepped on the copperback dragon's body and grabbed the copperback dragon's tail, tearing it violently. Rip! A clear sound was heard. Under the king beast's tearing, the copperback dragon's tail was torn off, and bronze blood spurted out. After throwing away the broken tail, the king beast grabbed one of the copperback dragon's legs. Without exception, The copper-backed dragon's leg was torn off as well. In the eyes of Gray and the other four, a brutal scene appeared. The 10-meter-long copper-backed dragon was torn apart by the King Kong Beast King's attack. Its head, 4 legs, tail, and body were all separated. The huge copper-backed dragon was completely dismembered. Chapter 471. Roar. After dismembering the copper-backed dragon, the king beast let out a bloodthirsty roar. It grabbed one of the copper-backed dragon's thighs and started tearing them apart. With the king beast's third desolate level strength, it should have been easy to kill the copper-backed dragon, but it didn't do so. Instead, it killed the copper-backed dragon in the most brutal way possible. It wasn't hard to see the king beast's violent nature from this. The king beast was definitely one of the most violent blood beasts. Whoosh! Looking at the king beast feasting in the distance, Stanley Grinton suddenly appeared beside Gray. Other than Sophia, the 3 elders of the Purple Moon Kingdom were all shocked. They didn't know that Gray had the ability to control corpses, and that he was controlling the former Stanley Grinton. Whoosh! After greeting Mubus Violet without further explanation, Gray controlled Stanley Grinton to charge at the king beast. With Mubus Violet's speed, the distance of a few hundred meters was covered in an instant. Roar. On the other side, the king beast had already noticed Stanley Grinton the moment he charged out. It threw away the copper-backed dragon's thigh in its hand and looked at Stanley Grinton with a violent gaze. Instead of retreating, it charged forward. Its huge fist, wrapped in a hard layer of cuticle and the size of a millstone, punched towards Stanley Grinton. Boom! Stanley Grinton dodged to the side. The millstone-sized fist smashed into the ground, creating a huge crater with a diameter of more than 10 meters. Bang! After dodging to the side, Stanley Grinton stomped on the ground. His body shot up like a cannonball. He unsheathed the broken sword at his waist and slashed at the king beast's neck. Although the king beast was huge, its reaction wasn't slow. Its other fist appeared and blocked the sword. Clang! The fist and the broken sword collided. Both the king beast and Stanley Grinton couldn't help but retreat. They were evenly matched. Whether it was speed or strength, the man and beast were evenly matched. Stanley Grinton had once been a king-class expert. His strength and speed were both at the king class. Although the King Kong beast was only at the 3rd level of the Desolation class, its body-type bloodline made its strength and speed comparable to a king-class expert. Whoosh! After stabilizing themselves, the man and beast charged at each other again. Stanley Grinton jumped up and aimed at the king beast's throat again. The king beast slapped Stanley Grinton from the side. Just king beast slapped the king's giant beast's paw. Stanley Grinton made a strange movement in the air. He stomped in the air, and his body suddenly grew taller, as if he was stepping on an invisible staircase. He dodged the giant palm and slashed at the King Kong beast's throat. He was a king-class expert when he was alive. His strength and speed were no different from a king-class expert. Stanley Grinton also had the ability to stay in the air. Puff! The King Kong beast tilted its body slightly, and the broken sword landed on its shoulder. The King Kong beast was sent flying with a loud bang. However, the injury wasn't serious. The king beast got up and continued to pounce on Stanley Grinton. The king beast's defense was also at the level of a normal king beast warrior. Bang bang bang! The sound of explosions rang out continuously. It was as if a giant cannon was firing. The man and beast, who had a huge difference in height, continued to fight. Potholes with a diameter of more than 10 meters appeared in the surrounding area. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Suddenly, 4 thick metal chains shot up from the ground around the king beast. They wrapped around the king beast's body, binding the king beast's legs and hands. Mubus Violet, who was at the 3rd level of the Desolation level, rushed over to help. He didn't use the Purple Flame Beast Sequence Blood technique, which was widely known in the Purple Moon Kingdom. Instead, he used the metal ability. This ability had an unusual sensitivity to metal. It was very helpful for refining weapons. Crash! The king beast, whose hands and feet were bound by the 4 thick metal chains, roared in anger. It struggled furiously. Visible cracks appeared on the metal chains. Given the toughness of the metal chains, it was almost impossible for a 3rd-level desolation level underage king beast to break free. However, the king beast was different. Although it was underage and wasn't a real king beast, its strength wasn't any weaker than a normal king beast. Naturally, it wasn't included. Whoosh! The king beast's hands and feet were bound by the metal chains. Stanley Grinton, who was controlled by Gray, naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity. Using the strength and speed of a king beast, Stanley Grinton stayed in the air at the same height as the king beast. He slashed the broken sword at the huge eye in the middle of the king beast's head. The King Kong beast lowered its head abruptly, avoiding its eyes. Its thick horns collided with the broken saber, knocking Stan Niglanton back. Crack! The metal chains were already full of cracks. Seeing that it was about to break free, Gray controlled Stanley Grinton to approach again. He no longer aimed at the eye, but at the throat. Puff! A shallow wound appeared on the King Kong beast king's throat, and dark red blood flowed out. At the same time, the king beast broke free of the metal chains and punched Stanley Grinton. Stanley Grinton was sent flying, creating a crater more than 10 meters deep in the ground. However, there were no wounds on his body. He jumped out of the crater and pounced at the king beast again. When the king beast's fist came down, Gray had already used his metallization ability on Stanley Grinton. Stanley Grinton's defense was increased by a large margin compared to a normal king beast's. Against Stanley Grinton's defense, even a 3rd-level desolation level attack from the king beast would find it difficult to leave a wound on him. Boom, boom, boom. Stanley Grinton and Mubus Violet worked together to fight the king beast. The shock waves from their battle affected everything within a few hundred meters. All the plants had disappeared, and there were craters everywhere. Even the hard rocks beneath the ground were exposed, forcing Gray, Sophia, and the others to retreat slightly to avoid being caught in the crossfire. This was a difficult battle. In terms of combat power, Stanley Grinton and the 3rd-level desolation level expert of the royal family, Mubus Violet, were naturally stronger than the king beast. However, the king beast's strong physique made it difficult for Stanley Grinton and Mubus Violet's attacks to injure it. Gray, who was commanding Stanley Grinton from afar, finally understood how Curtis Blaze felt when he faced him on the battlefield with the Flame Kingdom. Even if he used all his strength, he could only leave light injuries on the other party. After slashing it over 100 times, he found that the other party was still alive and kicking. One could imagine the helplessness he felt. Its physique is definitely comparable to that of a king tier. An elder of the Purple Moon Kingdom exclaimed. A 3rd-level desolation level expert already has such a strong physique. If the king beast was at its peak, I'm afraid it could even tear a king tier blood fiend apart. Another elder of the Purple Moon Kingdom's royal family exclaimed. Fortunately, we have Sir Gray's powerful combat power this time. Otherwise, with Mubus's strength, it would be a problem for him to escape unscathed. The elder of the Purple Moon Kingdom's royal family said solemnly. Although the Purple Moon Kingdom had books that recorded the king beast, their understanding of the king beast was obviously inferior to Gray, who had the bloodline of the king beast. Before the battle, they did not know that the king beast's physique was almost the same as that of a king beast. It was only after watching the battle that they made the judgment. Clang! The king beast's fist smashed towards Stanley Grinton, but Stanley Grinton blocked it with his broken sword. The force generated from the collision between the two caused sand and pebbles to fly around. At this moment, a chain as thick as a bucket smashed onto the king beast's body. The king beast flew backward. Before it could get up from the ground, the chain as thick as a bucket split into 4 and bound the king beast's 2 hands and 2 legs. Stanley Grinton appeared and viciously slashed at the king beast's throat with his sword. However, the king beast's throat was left with a light injury that was not fatal. Before he could slash a second time, The king beast had already broken free from the chains. Under the siege of Stanley Grinton and Mubus Violet, the king beast's injuries continued to increase. However, these injuries were not too serious and could not cause fatal damage to the king beast. The two sides continued to fight and the battle was in a stalemate. A few hours later, the king beast's injuries caused it to lose a lot of blood. It was visibly dispirited and the large amount of blood loss affected it. Mubus Violet's blood power was almost exhausted. It would take a while before he could help Stanley Grinton. Only Stanley Grinton was still alive and kicking. He was controlled by the ability to control corpses and did not feel fatigue at all. In addition to his strong body after metallization, the king beast could not hurt him at all. Even after a few hours, there were still no injuries on his body. Bang! The king beast fell to the ground under Stanley Grinton's slash. Hula! 4 thick chains suddenly appeared like 4 giant snakes and tied up the king beast. Swish! Stanley Grinton rushed forward, aimed at the throat, and slashed down with his sword. Puff! The broken sword landed on the King Kong beast's wound, which was already there. It made the wound even deeper. Puff! The king beast, who was no longer in its peak state, could not break free from the chains on its body. The broken sword was raised again and slashed down again. Again, at the original wound, the wound became even deeper. Puff! Another slash. Including the previous slash, this place had been slashed 100 times. The king beast's throat was suddenly cut open. Crack! The king beast finally broke free from the shackles on its body and punched Stanley Grinton, sending Stanley Grinton flying. However, after sending Stanley Grinton flying, the king beast was also at the end of its rope. Roar! The king beast, who was at the end of its rope, rolled violently and hammered the ground violently. The surrounding area sank and collapsed. Finally, with an unwilling howl, the king beast fell to the ground with a plop and no longer made a sound. After fighting for several hours, the king beast was finally killed. Chapter 472. It's finally dead. Looking at the king beast that was completely dead and lying on the ground, Gray and the others could not help but let out a sigh of relief. Even Sophia and the other 2 elders of the Purple Moon Kingdom, who were paying attention to the battle, couldn't help but feel a wave of exhaustion in their hearts, let alone Mubus Violet, who was participating in the battle, and Gray, who was commanding the battle from afar. A battle that had lasted for several hours was not something that an ordinary person could endure. If it had been 2 level 3 Desolation level blood warriors, it was most likely that they would have given up on hunting the king beast. Only Stanley Grinton, who did not need to consume blood power and did not feel fatigue, could have persisted until the end to slay the king beast. Hurry up and collect the blood. This kind of mental exhaustion caused everyone's reactions to become sluggish. After a while, everyone finally reacted and hurried forward to collect the blood. During the battle, the king beast had lost a lot of blood. If they did not collect the blood quickly, the remaining blood might not even be enough to refine equipment. As for extracting the blood essence of the king beast, that was out of the question. The remaining blood was not enough to extract the blood essence. Fortunately, their goal was not to obtain the blood essence of the king beast to implant a bloodline. If that was the case, they were destined to fail. It's barely enough. In the end, everyone collected a total of 4 rune bags and about 800 portions of blood. Although the amount was not considered little, compared to the king beast's 9-meter-tall body and weight of several tons, it was obviously a lot of blood loss. After collecting the blood, everyone was busy peeling the scales off the king beast's body. By the time they were done, it was already close to evening. The 5 of them set up their tents and prepared to rest for the night. The corpse of the king beast naturally belonged to Gray. He temporarily gave up his control over Stanley Grinton and switched it to the king beast. Although the king beast's current appearance was quite miserable, its blood had been drained, its scales had been completely peeled off, and its body was covered in blood. Its brain was not damaged, so it could still control itself. Then, He controlled the king beast to come to an area where the vegetation was still lush and used the reverse nurturing ability. Suddenly, a large amount of green light floated out from these plants and gathered towards the king beast, while these plants withered and turned yellow. The king beast's wounds and scales were recovering, but the rate of recovery was much slower than usual. In the end, Gray used up more than half of his blood force to restore the king beast to its original state. He actually used up so much blood energy. When he was repairing Stanley Grinton, Gray had already discovered that the more powerful the opponent's body was, the more time and blood energy would be needed to repair it. The king beast's body was not inferior to that of a king tier. In addition, there were too many injuries on its body, which ultimately led to Gray using up more than half of his blood energy to repair it. Gray did this without hiding anything. After all, Sophia and the others already knew that he had the ability to control corpses and reverse nurturing. As a result, the three elders of the royal family looked at Gray as if they were looking at a monster. They could also see that between Stanley Grinton and the king beast, Gray could only control one. However, when they thought about how difficult it was to kill the king beast, and then how its injuries had completely recovered and it had become Gray's battle strength, they could not help but be amazed. Now, no one below king tier could be his opponent. "Gray boy, let's make a deal." After staring at the king beast for a long time, Mubus Violet looked at Gray with a burning gaze. "Old man, I have something to do. I'll leave first." Being stared at by the other party's burning gaze, Gray trembled all over. He put away the king beast and left as if he was escaping. Mubus Violet's voice sounded behind him. "Don't let me peel it a few more times. It'll recover anyway." Gray's steps staggered, and his speed increased. Although the king beast's lost scales could be repaired through reverse nurturing, it would require a lot of blood energy. Even if it were to be peeled again, with his current blood energy, it would not be enough to repair it, let alone peeling it a few more times. In the morning, Gray's group continued their routine training, heading deeper into the endless ice field. The temperature dropped even lower. On the road, white snow could already be seen on the mountain peak. Howl! Sounds of fighting could be heard ahead. When Gray's group rushed over, they saw two people attacking a blood fiend. There were 4 people standing at the side, not making a move. The blood fiend that the 2 people were attacking was a desolate level blood fiend. However, the 2 of them were not weak as they had also reached the desolate level. Working together, they quickly killed the desolate level blood fiend. They're from the Jewel Kingdom. Gray had seen these 6 people in the Jewel Kingdom's royal team. They were undoubtedly from the Jewel Kingdom. Without greeting the 6 people, Gray's group retreated and continued their journey into the depths of the endless ice fields. In a place like the endless ice fields, if one were to greet them rashly, they might be seen as having ulterior motives and arouse the hostility of the other party. Therefore, other than people from the same kingdom, one would not greet people from other kingdoms if they met them. Along the way they met a few other teams. Some were from the Purple Moon Kingdom, while others were from other kingdoms. After a few days, Gray's group was already quite deep into the endless ice field. The temperature had dropped even lower, and snow had accumulated on the ground. The surrounding mountain peaks were all white, but it was not that there were no plants. Amidst the snow and ice, some icy green plants could be seen from time to time. This was the source of food for the herbivores in the endless ice field. The 5 of them were not weak, so naturally, they were not affected by the change in temperature. The 5 of them continued their journey unaffected. "There's someone in front." Suddenly, Sophia's delicate eyebrows furrowed as she looked to the left in front of them. Gray and the rest followed her gaze and saw a person lying in the snow in front of them. They could vaguely see red blood stains around him. "He's dead." The 5 of them walked over. Gray went forward to check his breathing and found that he was no longer breathing. "I've seen this person in the Crimson Kingdom's Duke's team," an old man from the Purple Moon Kingdom's royal family said. "The injuries on his body are from a sharp blade. He wasn't killed by a blood fiend, but by someone else. Another old man from the Purple Moon Kingdom's royal family said, as he flipped the person over and examined the injuries on his body. He must have found something good and was robbed. However, the person who did it was too ruthless. Not only did he rob the item, but he also killed the person. The 5 of them continued on their journey. They were not surprised by this fight. In fact, they had already expected it. The relationship between the 3 kingdoms could not be considered close. When there were interests involved, it was expected that a fight would occur. Moreover, the Flame Kingdom should have also entered the endless ice fields. The possibility of this person being killed by the people from the Flame Kingdom was higher. After all, it was rare for the 3 kingdoms to be so ruthless. A day later, Gray's group of 5 walked on a thick layer of snow. Poof! Suddenly, the snow near Gray's group was pierced through. 4 huge tails with sharp spikes as thick as an adult's thigh pierced through the snow. They were aimed at Gray, Sophia, and the other 2 old men from the Purple Moon Kingdom's royal family. The huge tails were dark brown in color. On the spikes there was a faint green luster. If he was not wrong, the spikes should be poisonous. Sudden, it was too sudden. The sneak attack was too sudden and extremely fast. When they noticed it, it was already less than a few meters away from Gray's group. Swoosh! Enveloped in blue light from head to toe, Sophia was able to dodge at the critical moment. Gray and the other 2 old men from the Purple Moon Kingdom's royal family did not have the speed of Sophia. They could not dodge in time and were immediately pierced by the spike. Poof, poof! A bloody hole appeared on the 2 old men's bodies. Blood splattered as they were flung away by the huge tails. Their wounds were suffused with a faint green luster. A wave of numbness quickly spread from the wounds to their bodies. Clang! Although Gray's clothes were pierced, he was fine. At the crucial moment, he used his metallization ability and blocked the attack with his strong defense. He was not injured by the attack. Poof! Gray counterattacked. He unsheathed his long sword and stabbed towards the huge tail. It was immediately cut off. One of its huge tails was chopped off, and the blood fiend under the snow let out a hiss. The broken tail and the other 3 huge tails quickly retracted, and the body under the snow quickly fled into the distance. One could vaguely see the snow slightly bulging as it moved. Poof! Mubus Violet made his move. He chased to where the snow bulged and stabbed down with his sword. Accompanied by a sharp hiss, the blood fiend under the snow struggled rapidly. The snow was lifted and the blood fiend under the snow was revealed. It was a blood fiend that looked like a scorpion. However, it had 4 tails. At this moment, its body was deeply stabbed in the back by Mubus Violet's sword. The remaining 3 tails of the blood fiend revealed sharp spikes and pierced towards Mubs Violet. Poof! 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 At this moment, metal chains appeared. Not only did they bind the 3 tentacles, they also pierced through the blood fiend's body. Soon, the blood fiend stopped struggling. Quick, use the antidote. Sophia quickly took out the antidote and fed it to the 2 elders. Gray changed his clothes and frowned as he looked at the huge scorpion's corpse. Even though their team was made up of desolate level experts, and there was a 3rd stage desolate level expert in the team, there were still people who were injured. It was clear how dangerous the endless icy plains were. After a short rest, the 5 of them resumed their journey. After traveling for a few miles, their expressions suddenly changed. They quickly hid behind a huge mountain rock. In front of them, one blood fiend after another was moving in the same direction. There were all sorts of blood fiends, from desolate level blood fiends to murderous level blood fiends. It was as if a beast tide had occurred. However, it was obvious that this was not a beast tide. These blood fiends were not moving very quickly. They did not seem to be under threat of death. Instead, they seemed to be attracted by something.